At the Academy of Magic and Swordsmanship, he is the most gifted student of all. But his power is a carefully guarded secret, and so everyone dares to look down on him. It is the single greatest mistake they could ever make. The lucky ones lose only an ear for their insolence. But the reason for his hidden strength is a truth beyond this world's wildest imagination. The day came when God himself turned on his creation, sending angels to cleanse the earth of human life. In the great war that followed, humanity fought back and won. But only one man, Ronin, was left standing on the battlefield. Even the woman he loved, one of the world's mightiest warriors, fell in the carnage. But this was not the end of his suffering. For in reality, their victory was nothing but a cruel illusion. The true angelic host had merely been observing, waiting for the perfect moment to strike the final blow. Every sacrifice had been meaningless. In the end, humanity's extinction was already sealed. Ronin wasn't powerful enough to defy fate itself. He had never received the elite training he deserved in his youth. With a final kiss from his beloved, he accepted his demise. But in that last moment, destiny's plan went awry. Instead of oblivion, Ronin awakens, 10 years in the past, back when he was just a poor, powerless boy, but now armed with all the knowledge of his previous life, a secret that no one in the Academy, or the entire world, could possibly suspect. That fateful day on the battlefield, humanity witnessed its most legendary battle. Our main character, Ronin, was victorious, but the falling rain masked his tears, for the price of this victory was far too steep. The ground was littered with the bodies of his comrades, people he had fought alongside and deeply respected. Was this slaughter truly necessary? As Ronin grieved, the voice of an angel echoed across the field, calling his name. A storm of rage consumed him. He unleashed his fury, screaming that the other angels were either defeated or sealed away for eternity. "This is what you get for underestimating us," Ronin roared. He fought to hide his weakness, but the angel saw right through him. "So many humans have fallen," the angel mused. "Warriors of your caliber no longer exist. So tell me, what does your hollow victory matter?" Ronin spat back with pure contempt, but the demonic-looking angel simply laughed. "What a tragedy. If only those humans hadn't looked down on you. If you had been properly trained, you might have become strong enough to defeat us all. Do you truly not regret defending the very mortals who shamed you?" Ronin offered a bitter smile. "My life was hell, I know that. Now shut your mouth and die." He sent the angel back to its god with a message of failure. Alone, Ronin walked the blood-soaked earth, his mind reeling with the memories of the fallen. He couldn't grasp it. How could those colossal angels withstand the aura attacks of the world's greatest warriors, only to fall to his simple blade? Though he possessed no mana, his despair was pierced by a familiar voice calling his name. Stumbling forward, Ronin moved toward the sound. It was Adashin, the beautiful and formidable commander of the human forces. Even on the brink of death, he couldn't help but tease her. For a commander, "You don't look much better than I do." Adashin gave a faint smile, asking if his name was truly just Ronin, a mere corporal. Looking him over, she could see he was barely holding on himself. She had to know. "Is Ayut, the giant general, dead?" Ronin confirmed it. "I killed that monster with my own hands." At his words, Adashin's entire demeanor shifted. It was as if she'd been holding on to life just to hear the battle's outcome. Her tears mixed with the rain streaming down her face. "Thank you, Ronin," she whispered, "for everything you have done." He stood speechless for a moment before finally asking, "If you're truly grateful, grant me one final wish. From now on, treat the common soldiers better. Let them be respected as equals." Adashin took a ragged breath. "It would be better if you ensured that yourself, because I don't think I'm going to make it." Ronin let out a harsh laugh that almost stole his last breath. "Look at the two of us. How is it that I'm in better shape than you? I'll be joining you in death any minute now." They spoke for what felt like an eternity, until Adashin asked what he would do if he survived. Ronin gave a weary smile. "There are so many things I wish I could do, but only one thought fills my mind right now. I want to know, how much better could I have fought in this war? If I'd only gone to the academy when I was young." He spoke the words that haunted him, the giant's taunts echoing in his soul. But more than that, it had been his own sister's dying wish. In a heavy voice, Ronin murmured that he would see his family again soon. Adashin, exhausted, tried to offer him hope, telling him he would survive. But before she could finish her sentence, a single, deafening drop of water signaled the end of the downpour. The rain stopped. A tremor then shook the very foundations of the earth, shattering their fleeting moment of peace. A dreadful premonition seized Ronin as he understood why. An angel descended before him, possessing so many wings it was a terrifying, almost absurd, sight to behold. Behind the winged general, a legion materialized from thin air. Hundreds of angels stood pristine, as if the brutal battle had never even happened. Exhaustion and disbelief crashed over the survivors. Where in the hell did these reinforcements come from? Just who were these beings? Addison's eyes widened in pure horror. Weren't those 3 colossal titans meant to be the final wave she had failed to save this world? For a third time, only one chance remained, but no clear path forward revealed itself. Lost in the depths of her despair, Addison barely noticed when Ronin's voice roared through the chaos, shattering her daze as he called for his commander. If she could just use her telekinesis to launch him, he could still put up a fight. Addison had lost all will to continue, but Ronin stood ready to challenge fate itself. Faced with this impossible war, his spirit never wavered for a single second. Even facing certain death, he would never stop fighting. Ronin's conviction was like steel. If this was his end, he would carve a path for humanity's future. Taking down as many monsters as he could, Addison froze. A startling realization sparked within her. This boy, this man, his will was far too great to be that of a mere soldier. If it was him, surely he had a better chance of saving this world than she ever did. Ronin, look at me. Corporal Ronin, a veteran of the most insane war imaginable, felt a jolt greater than any battle, as Commander Addison suddenly kissed him, and in that single moment, something passed between their lips. She transferred a glowing blue sphere of light directly to him, a final, desperate gambit, hidden from the Titan's watchful eyes. Ronin couldn't comprehend what it was, and the words Addison whispered in his ear are a secret that time has yet to reveal. You will only discover the truth by watching this story to its very end. For now, Ronin was completely lost in the moment. Then, Addison offered a sad, knowing smile. If we ever meet again, could you tell me to stop being a fool and just become a tailor instead? The multi-winged angel unleashed its final, devastating attack, and in that blinding flash of light, they both met their end. Or rather, that is how one of the most incredible stories ever told truly began. Ronin's eyes shot open, his commander's name a scream tearing from his throat. It had all been a dream, a terrifyingly vivid nightmare. He frantically looked around, his heart pounding in his chest. He couldn't believe it. He was home, Nimbaton, his hometown. It was real. He had actually returned to the past. This was the first day of his regression, sitting beneath a familiar tree. Her final words echoed in his mind. The kiss. The sphere of light. It was a temporal return pill. She had explained it all. It was the very artifact that allowed her to become the legendary commander she was. She had only been granted 4 returns in total. 3 had already been used. This was her very last chance, and she chose to give it to him. She believed he was the one who could finally defeat the Titans. That he, not her, was the key to stopping the end of the world. Her last wish was for him to grow stronger, to seize this new future. To do that, she said he had to enter the legendary Philion Academy. Only there could he forge himself into the hero this world so desperately needed. He then recalled her other words, her promise that they would meet again. She asked him to find her in this new timeline and tell her to quit being a soldier and just become a tailor. A commander who stared down gods wanted a simple life. He slammed his fist against the tree, the sharp pain confirming this was no dream. He was really back. But what could one man do alone? He picked up a fallen branch, stared at its solid weight, and a fire ignited in his eyes. He could do this. Clutching the branch like a sword, he took off at a full sprint. There was someone he had to see, his older sister. He raced through the familiar streets of his youth. If he truly had returned, then just up ahead, as expected, the sounds of a commotion reached his ears. He moved in closer to investigate. A group of thugs were tormenting a younger boy. He grimaced at the scene. They were hanging the kid upside down over the water. To think that these pathetic bullies hadn't changed at all. But looking closer, He realized it wasn't a rope holding the boy. He was suspended by a current of magic, a telekinetic, a rare and priceless asset on any battlefield. But finding one in a backwater town like this was unheard of. He saw a nervous-looking girl with the group, clearly the one using the power. At this rate, something terrible was going to happen to that child. The suspended boy cried out, pleading with them to let him go. He had no money, he explained, because his mother's medicine that month had been expensive. The lead thug just sneered. And why should I care about your sick mother? His empty pockets earned the boy a sharp slap across the face. The bully then turned, noticing the girl's magic beginning to waver. He yelled at his victim. Since you don't know your place, let's see how you like the view from the top of the tree. The girl stammered. We can't go any higher if I make a mistake. He'll be seriously hurt. The thug shot her a venomous glare. Shut up and lift him, before I decide to get rid of you both. Tears welled in the girl's eyes. How did she get dragged into this mess? She knew trapping someone with her magic was wrong. She only ever wanted to show that she was good at something. She had to tell them to stop. But she was absolutely terrified. But even so, she had to try. Gathering all her courage, she pleaded, Please, just stop this. In that instant, Ronin arrived, slamming the stick down onto her head. With a sharp crack, the magic binding the boy's feet shattered, and he fell to the ground. What do you think you're doing? The bully roared. He lunged toward the girl, shouting, Are you stopping just because this nobody told you to? Ronin's voice cut through the air. Don't waste your time on trash like him. You'll speak to me now. Her eyes widened in terror as she stared at him. His expression was grave. I have something very important to discuss with you. Where did you learn telekinesis? He demanded. She stammered. From a grimoire. I bought it from a traveling merchant. Ronin's mind raced. To be this skilled with nothing but a cheap grimoire. Her potential was staggering. He found her talent incredible and needed to test her true limits. But just then, he heard a familiar sound, the unmistakable ring of a sword being drawn. How dare you ignore me? The bully screamed. Charging at Ronin, he snarled, I'll wipe that smug look off your face. But Ronin's attention was fixed on the weapon. That was a magnificent sword. He effortlessly sidestepped the attack, leaving the bully baffled. How did he dodge that? A thought struck Ronin. Even in this younger body, the core of who he was remained unchanged. These were the instincts of a seasoned warrior. His battle senses hadn't dulled in the slightest. The bully sneered. Think you're lucky? Your luck just ran out. I'll make sure you never lift a finger again. He jeered at Ronin's silence. What's wrong? Scared you might as well get on your knees and beg for mercy. The bully's taunts grew darker. You know, if you die, I'll be sure to take very good care of your sister. Mentioning his sister was in that moment, a blinding rage consumed Ronin. He decided to teach the boy a lesson, and the bully's ear went flying. The sword clattered to the ground. He clamped both hands to the side of his head, shrieking in pure agony. My ear! My ear! Ronin despised those who made light of his sister. His voice was dangerously calm. Shall I teach you another lesson? The very same boy who had been a tormentor just moments before was now brought to his knees, trembling before Ronin. The rest of the group stared in disbelief. He had sliced off his ear with a mere stick. Ronin's chilling gaze fell upon them. Are you enjoying the spectacle? Now get lost, he commanded coldly, and take this piece of garbage with you. And one more thing, leave the money you stole, plus compensation for ruining my day. The boys scrambled to agree, promising to return everything. Ronin then handed the money to the boy from the tree. Stunned, the boy asked, are you sure all of this for me? Ronin's eyes were fixed on the blade. The only thing that matters to me is that sword. The boy was immensely grateful. Or maybe he wasn't. Ronin just told him to go home. Aesel, meanwhile, was overcome with shame and apologized to them both. He knew what he did was wrong, but fear had paralyzed him. Sobbing, he confessed, It's all my fault. I am so... The boy muttered that Aesel was crying now, just like the day Hans had first brought him to this place. He continued, saying that when he first saw him, he wondered if Aesel was trapped in the same kind of situation. Ronin placed a hand on Aesel's shoulder. Don't blame yourself. He offered a small smile. It's not your fault, but I appreciate the apology. With his money and belongings back in his hands, The boy bid them farewell. Ronin and Aesol watched silently as he walked away. Ronin glanced over at Aesol. This situation wasn't so bad. Remember when I said I had something to settle with you? He looked Aesol directly in the eye. We're going to see each other again. In 4 days. I have a few things I need to deal with, Ronin stated. We'll meet again when light returns to the sky. You understand what will happen if you don't show up, don't you? And just like that, he vanished into the distance. Aesol was left behind, thinking Ronin was acting more strangely than ever. He now stood before the door of a small, secluded hut nestled deep within the forest. He held a handful of flowers, remembering she always liked them. He almost threw them away in a moment of panic. But it was too late. The door had already opened. A soft voice drifted from inside. I was wondering who could be out here. Though his back was turned, she knew. Ronin. He quickly turned to face her. Her eyes lit up with joy. You've returned, she said, beaming from the doorway. You're back early today. I'm home, he replied. Tears welled up in her eyes. I never dreamed I would live long enough to receive flowers from my little brother. Seeing her genuine happiness filled him with a quiet sense of relief. You're so sweet, my dear brother, she said warmly. Would you like some more soup? But he replied that he was already full. Ronin then asked, How old will you be this year? She replied. 22? Why? 22. His mind sank. That means there are only 10 years left. 10 years until those winged beings descend upon the world again. His sister placed her hand on his forehead. He looked at this incredible, kind person. His sister. He wished he could freeze this moment in time and make it last forever. But he knew that peace was fleeting. In 10 years, to protect her, and to protect the world, he had to act. There's something I need to say. I'm thinking about entering the academy. The words hung in the air, catching her completely by surprise. Then, her shock melted away into overwhelming, emotional happiness. Was she hearing things? Did he truly intend to enter the academy? She shot up, declaring there was no time to waste. Gathering a few items, she admitted she always knew this day would arrive. He was brilliant, and she had no doubt he would excel. With a grunt of effort, she heaved a massive cauldron into the room. This, she announced, was her gift to him. He peered inside, his eyes widening. The enormous pot was brimming with coins. He could only ask, how much was in there? She confessed she'd saved it all for him, terrified he might abandon his dream. With this, they could pay for everything in an instant. He appreciated her sacrifice, but insisted she use it for herself. Then, he made his declaration he was aiming for the Imperial Filian Academy. A wave of shock washed over her. Just moments ago, he wanted nothing to do with academics. And now, he was aiming for the most prestigious school in the world. The Imperial Filian Academy was a legendary fortress of learning. Resembling an ancient castle, it boasted the greatest minds on the entire continent. He knew its graduates had been pivotal during the Great War, a testament to the Academy's brutal entry standards and astronomical fees. But that very fame was also a major hurdle. He never imagined this would be her reaction. A radiant smile broke across his sister's face, her happiness overflowing. Now, all he had to do was prove he was worthy. Ronin stood at the rendezvous point, waiting for Aesol. She arrived with a sigh, stating she only came because he wouldn't stop pestering her. He smirked. It was going to be a long night. There was an experiment he desperately wanted to conduct with her. Aesol questioned his intentions. He brushed it off, saying it was nothing serious. Then asked her to lift him as high as she could with her telekinesis. Use telekinesis as out of the blue, just like that. She stared at him, bewildered, asking why he thought she'd agree to something so reckless. I won't die, he assured her. So don't worry. With a heavy sigh, Aesol warned him that she was about to begin. Mana flared to life around her as she unleashed her power, willing his body to levitate. As he rose from the ground, a familiar sensation washed over him. It wasn't as high or stable as before, but the feeling, it was the same. This was the very power that allowed him to fight on equal footing with the mighty Hayut during their last battle. Telekinesis, an ability so rare, even among the continent's few mages, that it was considered a myth. Ronin knew it in his gut. Aesol's power would be the single most important weapon in the war to come, but she was already struggling to maintain it. Can I bring you down now? She pleaded. He refused. wanting to stay suspended a little longer. "Don't worry," he said. "I'll get down on my own."
What could he possibly mean by that? Ronin gripped the hilt of his sword, his muscles tensing as he prepared to slash at the empty air. With a single, decisive strike, he severed the streams of mana holding him aloft and landed gracefully on his feet.
She demanded to know what he'd just done. He shrugged it off as a simple acrobatic trick he'd learned, telling her not to worry about it. But inside, he knew. He had to understand the true nature of this strange ability. This power, it might be connected to why only his sword could harm the giants. He would have to unravel this mystery, one step at a time. For now, something more important was at hand. Aesel had passed his test. This was the first page in the legend of Ronin, the greatest story the Empire would ever know. Deeper in the forest, Aesel and Ronin walked along a winding path. She had to ask again, just to be sure. "The Philian Academy." He confirmed it, wondering why she kept doubting him.
"What are you thinking?" she pressed. Revealing she had no desire to go, she understood why he wanted to, but
he was a genius in martial arts. But she was nothing. Aesel admitted she was just a timid coward.
"And you want to live the rest of your life like that?" Ronin shot back. "Wasting your God-given talent on those worthless villagers?"
Ronin saw her clearly. She wasn't a bad person, just hopelessly timid and cowardly. A crybaby who wept at the smallest thing. A loser terrified of her own shadow. "But that's fine," Ronin declared. "Because starting today, you can change." His voice grew serious. The choices made from this point forward would define her entire future. "One day," he said softly, "you'll regret it, just like I once did." He placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "So, what will it be? Have you—"
Aesel stared at him, shocked. Why would someone like Ronin care so much about a nobody like her?
"It's your life," Ronin said, turning away. "If you want to go back, go. I have things to do." "Wait," Aesel cried out. I want to change too."
A satisfied smile touched Ronin's lips. "Good. Then I'll teach you everything you need to know. This is the first obstacle you must overcome as the new Aesel."
Everything was falling into place, just as he'd planned. Nearby, Aesel's eyes were wide with terror, fixed on a crackling campfire. Peeking from behind a bush, she whispered fearfully, "That is my obstacle." "He's the perfect opponent to awaken your true potential," Ronin explained. "A Luna goblin. And not just any goblin. He's the chief of his tribe." Ronin was immensely satisfied with his find. He turned to a trembling Aesel and asked, "So enjoying the view?" With a glance at the creatures below, Ronin asked, "Shall we begin?" They were Luna goblins, a variant native to this region. Most people knew common goblins by their sickly yellow skin and crooked bodies. But the single defining trait of Luna goblins was their obsession with treasure. They ambushed merchants. Driven by an insatiable greed, they would hoard their plunder in one sacred place, waiting for a full moon like tonight to hold their grand moon festival. The reason for their mission suddenly became clear to Aesel. Ronin declared with a smirk that they were stealing it all. He had heard the legends before, of goblins who guarded a massive hoard and celebrated with strange rituals. Aesel wondered how Ronin knew such things, to which he replied, "I have my ways." He pulled Aesel closer, whispering his audacious plan. He would use telekinesis to lift the entire hoard into their bags. He made it sound simple, but Aesel knew better. A single misstep, and the whole camp would awaken. They would be quite upset, Ronin mused with a grin. Aesel insisted the plan was too reckless and that they should reconsider. Ronin's tone grew serious, explaining that to enter the academy, they needed two things. First, an obscene amount of money, and second, real combat experience. The gold was a problem, but experience was the real barrier. The academy was filled with aristocrats who'd had elite training since birth. If Aesel wanted to surpass them, there was only one path. Gaining true experience meant risking his own life. "These creatures," Ronin said, "are the perfect test. We get both money and experience." He challenged Aesel to offer a better plan. Hearing none, he began. An unseen force started to lift the goblins' treasure into their sacks. Silver coins, gleaming gold, and radiant jewels flowed through the air. The bags began to swell, nearly bursting at the seams. "Just a little more," Ronin muttered, his focus absolute. As the last bag filled to the brim, he finally said, "That's it. He watched the river of treasure with immense satisfaction. When the final sack was full, he declared, "That's the last of it." "There's no better teacher than experience," Ronin said, patting Aesel's head. He thought, "The kid lacks confidence, but he'll get used to it."
Aesel was proving to be more capable than he imagined. A glint appeared in Ronin's eye. He had found a true gem of a partner.
"The bags are full," he announced. "Time to make our exit."
Their business here was concluded. They had to disappear before their luck ran out. But from the darkness of the forest, chaos erupted. A bird flew for its life as two boys chased it, their shouts piercing the night.
The racket reached Ronin and Aesel's ears. "What kind of fools are causing a scene at this hour?" Ronin grumbled. The noise had done its damage, rousing the goblins from their slumber. They stumbled towards their treasure hoard, their eyes widening in shock. It was empty. A furious screech echoed through the camp. "The treasure, it's gone! There's a thief!" Within moments, the entire goblin clan was awake, a furious mob hungry for the culprits. Ronin and Aesel tried to slip away unnoticed, but it was too late. They were spotted. This was not going to end well. He knew how ferocious goblins could be, but Aesel was frozen with terror. Their perfect plan had just become a death trap. "What do we do?" Aesel stammered. "Do we drop the treasure and run for it?" "And how will you pay for your classes?" Ronin retorted. "There is no other way." Just then, the entire goblin horde locked onto their position. Ronin calmly inspected his weapon. It was a longsword, but it was forged from cheap, unreliable steel. He estimated it would shatter after 15 solid strikes. And before him stood 15 goblins, snarling and ready to attack. While Aesel trembled with fear, Ronin's focus became absolute. He gripped his hilt. 15 attacks, he thought. That's more than enough. With a sudden burst of speed, he began to cut. Aesel could only watch as heads started to fly. A single devastating swing had taken down 3 of them. 14 strikes left. Unbeknownst to them, the source of the commotion that woke the goblins was still nearby. With his sword buried in the last goblin's skull, Ronin casually remarked, "And that's that. Not so tough." Aesel was still sitting in the exact same spot. Stunned, he couldn't believe what he'd just witnessed. Ronin had killed 3 goblins in one move, and then wiped out the rest. He saw Ronin disappear for a split second, only to reappear somewhere else in an instant. The goblins were completely outmatched. Aesel replayed the brutal, yet elegant, slaughter in his mind. "Are you just going to daydream?" Ronin's voice snapped him out of it. "Grab the sacks. We're leaving." So much for an easy night, Ronin thought. Nothing ever went according to plan. His muscles already ached just from cutting down goblins. "I definitely need to work on my physical conditioning." He decided. Aesel finally asked, "What were those screams from before?" Ronin admitted he didn't know. But then, the realization dawned on him. Those screams were the reason their perfect heist had fallen apart. He vowed they would pay dearly for putting his life at risk. Suddenly, an arrow whistled through the air, aimed directly for a cell. Terror seized him as he saw death flying toward him. But in a flash, Ronin's hand shot out, snatching the lethal projectile from the air. Aesel's blood ran cold as he stared at Ronin holding the arrow that should have ended him. He was convinced this forest was cursed, teeming with absolute lunatics. Then, the 2 responsible for the commotion, who had been chasing a bird, finally showed themselves. Ronin's eyes narrowed at their pathetic excuses. Their apologies and claims of just being kids felt utterly hollow. One of them spun a tale about hearing a noise and mistaking them for a monster, all while his greedy eyes were locked on their treasure-filled backpack. One thug whispered to the other that they nearly killed someone. Ronin's voice cut through the air like ice. "Stop! Your pathetic acting can't hide the greed in your eyes." He demanded they quit the charade and answer truthfully. "I'll ask again. Who are you?" A tense silence hung between them. Then, with sinister smiles, they spoke. "Allow us to introduce ourselves." Properly. With a hand already on his sword, one of them lunged at Ronin, screaming that he was Caliboro. But Ronin was faster. He caught the sword hand, and with his other, delivered a brutal punch to the man's face. The boy who took the blow collapsed in shock. Ronin recognized their kind, and his face was a mask of pure disgust. Seeing his partner fall, the second man charged forward in a blind rage. Aesel panicked, seeing the man rush in unarmed. He unleashed his telekinesis, wrapping him in an invisible grip, stopping him dead before he could reach Ronin. He recognized the technique instantly. The legendary invisible hand. The opponent was completely paralyzed. Ronin gave Acel a look of pure approval before turning to his next task. Drawing his weapon, he became a blur of motion, landing multiple, devastating strikes on the immobilized man. The boy began to fall. Everything happening so fast he couldn't even register what was happening to him. Ronin watched impassively as the body hit the ground. Acel, despite his brave assist, was now trembling with fear. He stammered, asking Ronin if the boy was dead. "Yes," Ronin replied coldly. "I would never allow trash like that to live." He questioned him. "Didn't you hear them? They identified themselves as Calaboro."
They were part of a group infamous for illegal hunting, kidnapping, and human trafficking. The most malicious criminal organization in the entire empire.
While finishing off the other one, he told Acel that if he hadn't intervened, they would have undoubtedly sold his organs on the black market. He declared that knowing who they were, letting them live would have been the real crime. "Now stop making a fuss and grab their things," Ronin commanded. That's when he spotted a peculiar sack that was wriggling on its own. Acel wondered if an animal was inside, but Ronin was already opening the bag. "We'll find out soon enough," he said. The moment he opened it, a flash of blue burst out and took to the sky. Ronin stared, dumbfounded. What in the world is that blue chicken? The brilliant creature circled above them. Ronin couldn't help but wonder why it was blue. Acel confessed it was the first time he had ever seen a bluebird. "Me too," Ronin admitted, his sharp eyes then noticing the shackles clamped around the bird's legs. He recognized the design immediately. They were Calaboro traps, made to disrupt a captive's mana and restrict all movement. He knew they only used such devices in rare cases, or when capturing fantastic creatures. Could this bluebird be one of them? The bird met his gaze, its eyes pleading for something. As Ronin finally understood, a voice echoed directly inside his mind. Acel freaked out again, shouting that it had just spoken. Ronin explained calmly, "It's communication magic. It spoke the moment it left the sack, which meant the bag itself must have had mana-blocking properties." Speaking through the bird's telepathic link, Ronin asked the voice, "Are you the owner of this bluebird?" The voice introduced himself as Vaughn, a researcher of rare beasts. "My apologies for the rude intrusion," he said politely. "With whom do I have the pleasure of speaking?"
"We are just travelers," Ronin replied. "We just finished a fight with some thieves who had kidnapped this bird."
Ronin added that they had managed to save it. The bird's owner seemed worried that the thieves had been abducted. "The thought had crossed my mind," Vaughn said. "But who could imagine it would actually happen?" He continued, "I am unsure how I can ever repay this favor." Acel quickly said there was no need, and that they just needed to know how to return the bird. Ronin noted the bird's exhaustion and asked if removing the shackles would allow it to fly. The owner confirmed that it probably could. Vaughn explained that the dream bird had an excellent sense of direction. With that, Ronin drew his sword and with one clean strike, shattered the shackles restraining the bird. He spoke gently to the creature. "Go on, little blue. Go back to your father. You should stop making him worry," he added. The bird seemed to chirp in response, but Ronin couldn't understand its meaning. It began wagging its tail at him, a gesture he did not recognize. The bird's owner explained that it was asking him to pull out one of its feathers. Vaughn elaborated that a dream bird's feather acts as a compass, always pointing toward the main body. He asked if Ronin had taken one and added, "If you ever come to the institution, please visit me and Marquez, model." As the great bird soared away, he yelled out a promise to repay his debt. For a moment, they both just stared at the single feather left behind, before returning to their spoils. A few days later, they found themselves in a bustling town, ready to turn their rare finds into cash. A sharp-eyed merchant saw their items and his jaw dropped, immediately offering 20 gold coins for just one. The merchant declared that everything they had was a genuine treasure. Ronin finally felt satisfied. He'd found an honest man. Every other dealer had been a complete swindler. He never expected to find a fair merchant out here. The merchant was honored by the praise. Ronin then mentioned he had something else he needed an expert opinion on, pulling an object from his pocket. He showed it to the man, making it clear it wasn't for sale. He was just curious about its identity. He recalled the night he captured the strange blue creature. It had left this mysterious thing behind. When he first saw it, his initial thought was that the bird had left him some droppings. He figured the creature repaid his kindness with filth. Disgusted, he hurled it against a nearby rock, but to his shock, the rock shattered while the egg remained perfectly intact. He realized this was an item of incredible value. The merchant squinted, unsure if it was an egg, but certain it came from a fantastic beast. He carefully studied its strange color and texture. Feeling good, Ronin made a joke, asking if it was a horse egg. The merchant replied seriously that he had no idea what it was. He called it a truly unusual object and advised Ronin to seek out a specialized appraiser for a proper evaluation. Ronin put it away, stating again that he couldn't sell it. He was too curious to discover its true nature. Changing topics, Ronin asked if he sold any books about Phaon. He explained they were preparing for the Academy's entrance exam, but knew almost nothing. The merchant's face lit up. Explaining his own daughter was taking the same exam, he was sure she could help them. Just then, she appeared, asking her father who these people were. The merchant introduced her as his only daughter, Maria. The name struck Ronin as incredibly familiar, but when he saw she was a girl, he was completely stunned. Her father explained they were important clients who had just made a very profitable deal with him. She scoffed, calling them mere children. Her father immediately scolded her for being rude and apologized for his daughter's sharp tongue. While Aesel chatted with the merchant, he noticed that Ronin had gone strangely quiet and stepped aside. Ronin walked right up to the girl and asked, "Is your name really Maria, and is your last name Sen?" She said yes, demanding to know how he knew that. A strange feeling washed over him. She looked exactly like someone he used to know. He leaned in closer to ask another, more bizarre question. "Are you really a girl? Or are you a boy?" She stared back at him with pure disbelief, unable to process such an insane question. Utterly baffled, she had no idea why he was asking that. She couldn't begin to guess what was going on inside his head. Ronin glanced at the merchant, coming to a wild conclusion. That old man must have another child he never mentioned. "Shut it, you creep," she snapped, landing a sharp slap across his face. But as the sting spread, the sensation felt incredibly familiar. In that instant, he knew. It was him, his friend from his past life, Count Maria Center. Memories flooded back to his days as a soldier in Armarlin. Maria was in charge of supplies, an easygoing man with great principles. He was friends with everyone, but he always avoided crude man talk and had a very strange habit of slapping others. Ronin always wondered why. But since Maria had died before he could ask, he now found himself grinning, even after being slapped. He never thought he'd find the answer in this life. He had discovered the truth. Count Maria was a woman. Noticing his smile, she raised her hand for another slap, but he wouldn't allow it twice, and swiftly flicked her forehead. "Don't get cocky," he warned. "I only let you hit me that first time." "I let you hit me because I made a mistake," he said. She retorted, "Does this count too?" and headbutted him in the chin. The two immediately started brawling, pulling each other's hair as her father and Aesel watched in total confusion. They managed to pull the two apart. A moment later, Aesel was baffled. They were just trying to kill each other, and now they were talking normally. Now, Ronin was calmly browsing through the available weapons. If these items weren't good enough, he'd just have to buy something else. Aesel watched, seeing that the two were somehow fine. Maria pointed out 3 swords and a magic staff. "Why 3 swords?" she asked. "Won't that be difficult to carry?" He asked for her expert opinion. She admitted they were all decent, but that the black iron one was on another level. She explained that black iron was incredibly hard, a legendary material sought after by many renowned knights. He recalled the black iron sword, a favorite from a lifelong past. Meanwhile, Maria explained that the magic staff, with its superior magic stone, was destined for a mage. Her eyes fixed on him. She asked if this cutie was the mage. When she pressed him on his magic, he gave a one-word answer, "Tellus." She was stunned. Telekinesis was no small feat. With a talent like that, he could easily earn a scholarship. She then questioned Ronin, asking what technique he planned to display during the practical exam. To even enter the academy, she elaborated, he'd face a trial where he must dazzle the professors with his signature techniques. The written exam was notoriously tough, of course, but it was nothing compared to the crucible of the practical test. Ronin's reply was simple. To be a swordsman, all he needed was a sharp blade. But Maria countered, explaining that students demonstrate their combat arts by channeling mana. He wondered aloud if kids his age, even those who weren't mages, could already wield mana with their swords. She confirmed they used the basics for combat, but his blank expression told her everything. He had no idea. You don't know how to sense your own mana? She asked, incredulous. He questioned if it was something like aura. The word sent a shock through Maria. A boy, how could he have the audacity to suggest that the crude power of aura and the divine essence of mana were even remotely similar? She declared he wasn't fit to even walk behind her. Turning to the blacksmith, she asked to take the swords for their spar. She couldn't understand his confidence. Did he have any idea what would happen if he damaged these fine blades? Maria scoffed, claiming it would never happen. But if it did, she vowed to pay triple the cost. Enough talk, she commanded. Follow me. Your special training begins now. She explained that mana is the very root of nature's power. Only once a student masters their own mana can they hope to enter the academy. She felt it was pointless trying to explain the chasm between mana and aura to him. From a certain perspective, she conceded, aura was a type of mana. But the difference between them was like that of heaven and earth. Even the most talented prodigies train for at least 10 years just to grasp a sliver of its power. That was aura. She asked if he understood, and to her surprise, he calmly said yes. He casually mentioned encountering aura users on the battlefield a while back. He'd felt a sense of pride, a kinship in their shared power. They were annoying opponents, he admitted, but he never realized how incredible their power truly was. Maria cut him off. Enough talk. It was time to begin. She figured he was the type to learn much faster with his body than with his mind. As she readied her attack, he thought to himself that it would be fine. She was just a young girl. All he had to do was block her. But the moment their blades met, he was stunned. The force behind her strikes was unbelievable. He parried, pushing her back. He was in shock. How could someone so young wield such immense power, and with twin swords, no less? Maria couldn't get a clear read on him. His fighting style. It wasn't powered by mana. She watched intently, trying to figure out his secret. She decided to end this with a single, overwhelming strike. She would show him the true power of mana and force him to give up on the exam. It would be better than letting him suffer humiliation in the testing arena. And yet, she was the one being pushed back. This was the skill of someone who couldn't use mana. He broke the silence, asking her what she was so lost in thought about. The moment she refocused, the fight suddenly became easier for him. He began his real assault, warning her to dodge instead of block. A flicker of fear crossed her face, but he wasn't stopping his attack. She had no choice but to evade. This was Ronin's true strength. If she had hesitated for even a second, it could have been disastrous. "You're not normal," she breathed. He simply replied, "The same could be said for you." Putting his lack of mana aside, his talent with a sword was undeniable. His swing was a bit rusty, but if he polished it, his skills would improve immensely. As he turned to leave, she demanded to know where he was going. Her anger flared. "Do you think you've won just because of that?" "That doesn't matter," he said. "Just keep your promise." He held up his broken sword. "You said you'd pay 3 times the price." He then told the blacksmith to prepare his new swords. Elsewhere, Aesel was trying to get his attention, desperate to say something. He praised her for the demonstration. He now understood what was happening. But Ronin just told him to walk faster. He was getting tired. Maria remained frozen on the training ground, wondering just who those two really were. Meanwhile, Ronin had gone to the merchant's market to collect the money she owed. He found a stack of items next to the coin pouch and picked one up. "Is this a book?" "Yes," she admitted. "It's a theory book for the Academy's written exam, along with my own summaries." "Don't you need this?" she asked. "There's only 1 month until the test." He agreed he needed it, but why would she go this far for him? He asked if she was planning some kind of trick. "It's not like that," she said, flustered. I've started to like you guys." Maria insisted it was a gift because she wanted him to pass. She told him to study hard, warning that if he slacked off, there would be consequences. "Do you understand?" she demanded. Ronin simply replied, "The same applies to you." As her father's carriage departed, she promised to meet them again, in the capital, on the day of the exam. She urged them to master the materials she'd provided. Ronin knew this was his chance to forge his weak body into steel and conquer his academic shortcomings. And yet, this grueling path didn't feel so bad. This was his life now. This was Ronin's journey. Back home with his sister Iril, his training began in earnest. He ate like a starving beast, fueling a transformation from within, pushing his stamina past its breaking point.
He found his proving grounds in the wilderness, vowing not to stop until every last monster threatening his village was slain. His mind became a weapon too, as he devoured all the knowledge expected of a true soldier. The future was uncertain, but he poured his soul into every moment. A month flew by, and the day of destiny arrived. Valon, the capital city, awaited. Acel's jaw dropped. The sheer scale and beauty of the academy was breathtaking. He was completely captivated. Ronin snapped him out of it. "What are you gawking at? Stop acting like a country bumpkin and let's go. We'll be late for the exam." But Acel just stared, frozen in place. When Ronin asked what was wrong, Acel stammered, It's only been a month." "But you're already bigger." Ronin sighed. "Are we really doing this again?"
He gave Acel a few pats on the head. "Enough nonsense. Let's move." But as they walked, a thought sparked in Ronin's mind. Now that he was here, he might finally find him. He was searching for the sword saint, Schlieffen, a living legend from the prestigious Grantia family of master swordsmen. Perhaps their paths would cross during the exam. Not that it really mattered. Or so he told himself. Acel whispered, "Ronin, did you bring... You know..." Ronin knew exactly what he meant. The magical feather that would lead him to its owner. He'd packed it before they left, remembering the old man's words about living in the capital. The plan was simple: finish the test, then seek him out. The feather tugged insistently, pointing straight up towards the academy's highest floor. Meanwhile, in a room high above, the bird's owner sighed. This whole teacher thing was proving difficult. He longed to return to his quiet life of research. His companion, the bird Marquez, chirped to cheer him up. This was Professor Veron Ganesher, a leading zoologist, and a rare beast man. He mused to his bird. "I should open the window for some air, just in case my hero decides to visit." What could be the harm in that? Ronin hadn't even knocked, but the window was already open. There it was, the little blue bird from before. "Who is your master?" he wondered. Inside, chaos erupted. The professor nearly jumped out of his skin. "Who are you? And how in the world did you get up here?" Acel was gasping for air from the endless climb. Ronin shot back. "You scared me. I thought you were about to fall." The professor, Verrain, bristled with anger, assuming they were after his bird. But then he saw it. The familiar feather of Marquez, held gently in Ronin's hand. The pieces clicked into place. It took a moment, but then he understood. These boys were the heroes he'd been told about. The professor bowed in apology, but Ronin waved it off. "It's fine, no need for that," Acel muttered. "If you have to blame someone, blame me. I'm the one who had to climb all those stairs." Ronin quickly covered his friend's mouth. "Just be quiet." Ronin couldn't hide his surprise. The owner of this tiny bird was a lion, one of the rarest types of beast man in existence. Verrain was equally stunned. "You're just applicants for the exam." What a shame, he thought. If I'd known, I would have prepared a letter of recommendation, but the exam is this very afternoon. Ronin cut in. "Professor, I must ask you something. We don't have much time." He revealed the strange stone. "What is this? Your bird left it behind." The professor's eyes widened. This is a dream bird's egg. Marquez must have sensed an incredible power within you to bestow such a gift. "This isn't just any egg," he explained. "It's a legendary dream bird's egg. But what will hatch from it is a complete mystery." Ronin was confused. "If it's a dream bird's egg, won't another dream bird hatch?" "No," the professor explained. "The nature of a dream bird is unique. Its form is determined entirely by its environment and the ambient mana. Normally, we could analyze the mana to predict what will emerge. But this egg, it contains an infinite vortex of mana. It feels like liquid metal, almost as if its very nature has been fundamentally altered. I can't say for certain what will hatch." Ronin thought he might be overthinking it. The professor turned to his bird. "Marquez, where did you find the power to lay an egg like this?" "I have never met such an audacious bird in my entire life." Then, the professor had a proposal. "Would you be willing to care for this egg?" Ronin didn't hesitate. "I don't mind." "Are you sure?" Ronin asked. "Isn't this incredibly precious?" "Of course it is," the professor affirmed. "These birds only lay a single egg in their lifetime."
"But the fact that Marquez chose to lay it before you means he sensed something truly special."
"I have to respect the wishes of a friend I have known for so long." "Then I'll accept," Ronin said. His curiosity piqued.
He looked at the time. The exam was about to begin.
In 2 years, they would have to leave. But the professor stopped him. Wait, just one more moment. I've been pondering your reward, and I've come up with something exceptional. A gift to help you incubate that mysterious egg. Sometime later, in the tense atmosphere of the martial artist waiting area, an announcement echoed through the practical test hall. The exam for Candidate 111 was officially over. Candidate 102 was summoned next. The trials were underway. Ronin would be after him. This wait was beginning to feel endless. He glanced at Maria, who simply confirmed this was how every test went. He couldn't help but ask about her formal attire. Wasn't it incredibly restricting? She warned him to be mindful. This was a private academy for nobles. These people were potential clients. Making a powerful first impression was essential. She wasn't taking a test herself, as the mage exams were held in a separate location. A new announcement cut through the air. Candidate 112's exam was finished. Candidate 113 was to enter. At last, it was his turn. Maria gave him one last piece of advice. Don't get nervous, and do exactly as she instructed. Because if he failed, she would never let him forget it. But Ronin's confidence was unwavering. I'll be back soon, he promised. Inside, he faced a panel of examiners. These had to be the Academy's famous professors. They all radiated an intense pressure, but sitting in the center was an old man with an overwhelming presence. This was the principal himself, the great archmage Cravessier. But Ronin's attention was also drawn to a woman among them. The power she exuded was startling. He'd rarely felt such a potent aura, even in his past life. He offered a greeting and stated his name. It was the principal who acknowledged him. Cravessier explained the task: face a magic dummy and demonstrate his technique. Ronin barely gave it a second thought. A single, clean slash. For a mere dummy. That should be more than enough. But the examiners were caught off guard. That simple cut was executed without a single shred of mana. 2 professors scoffed aloud. The boy was foolishly judging the dummy by its appearance. That training dummy was a priceless marvel of magical engineering. Even the proclaimed genius Schlieffen had struggled to leave a mark on it. What could this unknown possibly hope to demonstrate? The principal grew uneasy. Their open mockery of a candidate was unprofessional. A curious thought crossed his mind. What if this boy proved them all wrong? In the next instant, the dummy's head flew from its shoulders. The swordsmanship professor, the great sword Stabos, was utterly speechless. Ronin casually sheathed his blade. Is that all? One of the professors stared in disbelief. He'd just executed an impossibly difficult slash, as if it were nothing. He turned to the principal for the score. But Cravessier was frozen. By what happened next? In a flash, Stabos vaulted over the table and pressed the... Ronin simply stared back. He commented that she'd startled him. She demanded to know who he was, and who had dared to teach him that style of swordsmanship. Ronin was confused by her barrage of questions. She switched her line of attack. Could you follow my movements? Yes, he replied calmly. They were, she sneered. At that speed, he shouldn't have been able to even draw his sword. And yet, he had managed to swing his own blade 3 times. Exactly 3 times. Mirroring a technique she'd shown only her top instructors. Did he think such an arrogant counterattack would go unnoticed? Did he truly believe she wouldn't recognize the very heart of her own fencing style? Then, he deliberately slowed the final strike, as if to mock their inability to perceive it. She hissed that he had clearly forgotten where he was. The headmaster and professors could only watch, stunned. But they had completely misunderstood the situation. He had simply adjusted his power, fearing his own sword would shatter from the force of the final blow. But judging by the rage in her eyes, she would never believe him now. Lowering her blade, the instructor's intense gaze burned into him. I will remember your name. A wicked smile crossed her lips. In fact, I will make it a point to teach you personally. The headmaster watched, knowing precisely what she meant. Teaching him personally. She was claiming him as her disciple. This student, he mused, would require very close attention. A fine performance, the headmaster finally said to Ronin. He would conclude the evaluation with one simple question. There was no correct answer. Ronin only needed to speak his mind. What? He asked. Did you come to this academy to learn? To Ronin, the answer was obvious. I came to learn how to live with no regrets. The response took the headmaster by surprise. Yet he understood completely. But it left Cravashier pondering a difficult question. How could they possibly teach a student such a profound lesson? One of the professors was still reeling. The boy seemed unremarkable. Yet he had utterly captivated both the Swordmaster and the Archmage. His eyes fell on the cleanly severed neck of the dummy. There was only one word that could explain this. Ain't. In the midst of the chaos, no one had properly inspected the dummy. When one professor finally did, his blood ran cold. The dummy's head was lying on the floor. Ronin's thoughts drifted back to that woman. Even in his prime, during his past life, he doubted he could have won against her. He believed his greatest trials were behind him. But after meeting her, he knew his journey had only just begun. Now he understood. The commander's decision to send him to the academy was right. There was still so much to learn. Only the written test remained. He had spent the last month cramming everything into his memory, so he thought it would be a breeze. But after taking the exam, he realized it was far more brutal than he'd imagined. It had been difficult, but then again, his entire life had been a relentless uphill battle. Mario was fuming at Acel, confessing he'd only answered half the questions. He had studied everything he needed, only for his mind to go completely blank. Acel felt a pang of guilt, blaming himself for not reminding Ronin to prepare. But Maria simply smiled, telling him to relax. The practical exam held far more weight, and with his skills, she was sure he had soared. A murmur rippled through the students as the results were finally posted. The moment of truth had arrived. A colossal board conjured by magic shimmered into existence, displaying the names of the chosen. Acel gasped. Is that the list of those who passed? Acel's name shone brightly 12th in the practical magic test, and first place in theory. Maria had secured 9th place in both exams. Her eyes met Acel's, and the two of them leaped for joy. They had passed. Maria showered him with praise for his first place rank in theory. He and two others were among the absolute best, and she couldn't be happier for him. Maria then turned to Ronin. What about your rank? He looked downcast and muttered, I knew it. I'm not on the list. Someone like me could never get into this academy. She stared at him, furious. Are you joking? Look closer, she demanded, her eyes wide with disbelief. At that moment, a brilliant pillar of light descended from the sky, erupting in a small, blinding explosion. Maria explained. That's the final results announcement. For the top candidates of each department. From within the light, a glorious phoenix emerged, and it seemed to be flying straight for Ronin. It burst into a message of fire, proclaiming Ronin as first place in the martial arts tactical test, and almost dead last in the theoretical. The three of them stood in stunned silence. But then, his two friends mobbed him, crushing him in a celebratory hug. The man who nearly failed the theory exam was the #1 candidate in the entire martial arts department. Maria beamed, knowing he was a true genius. A thought then crossed her mind if he ranked first. That meant that person must have lost to him. And with a personality like hers, there was no way she would let that go unnoticed. From the crowd, someone watched him. Their eyes filled with suspicion. A young man with an imposing aura pushed his way forward. Are you the one who ranked first in the practical test? And just like that, he was face to face with the sword saint, Schlieffen. Whispers spread through the onlookers like wildfire. It's him. The Empire's rising star is here, Maria warned Ronin. That guy looks like he wants to talk. It'll be a pain if he keeps this up. Ronin had never before encountered swordsmanship that radiated such power. The spirit pressing down on him was overwhelming. He knew he had to avoid this situation at all costs, so he feigned ignorance. I have no idea what you're talking about. That answer only seemed to enrage the man. Why are you lying? Ronin held his ground. What do you mean? Do you have any proof? You want proof? The young man snarled, his hand gripping his sword. I'll give you all the proof you need, in a flash. He unsheathed his blade and lunged. Maria and Acel cried out in alarm. Is that proof enough? The swordsman sneered. If you weren't #1, you wouldn't have even been able to react. The crowd surged with excitement, thinking a duel was about to erupt. Show me the skills that defeated my rival. Ronin knew he was cornered. If a fight was what he wanted, then a fight he would get. He unleashed a powerful attack directly at him, which the young man barely managed to block. Is that enough? Ronin asked. Are you satisfied? His opponent smirked. So your score wasn't a fluke. He admitted the technique was good, But as I suspected, he declared, it's not nearly enough to defeat me. Ronin wanted to escape this confrontation, but the Sword Saint was intent on revealing his hidden power, the sword. Saint was nowhere near satisfied. His pride refused to accept this. A chill went down Ronin's spine. This man was trying to kill him. This was exactly why he never wanted to meet him. If this continued, he'd be forced to use a storm of energy brewed from a single slash, an overwhelming aura known as the Storm Sword. He knew he couldn't block that. He turned and ran. You dare turn your back during a duel, his opponent roared. He swung his blade right for Aesel's neck. The opponent was still in pursuit, but he froze instantly when he saw what Ronin had done. Aesel, terrified, cried out, Ronin, what are you doing? The sword? Saint's face twisted in disgust. You coward, using a girl as a shield. I'm a man, Aesel shouted. But Ronin's thoughts were cold as ice, just as he predicted. Even on the verge of death, this man hadn't changed one bit. Knowing his opponent was bound by chivalry, he saw his opening and landed a solid punch right to his face. He then grabbed Maria's cell and vanished from the scene. The commotion had already drawn attention, and panicked onlookers were calling for the guards. When the guards finally arrived, they were met by the sight of Lord Shalene, who demanded to know what happened and who dared to lay a hand on him. But Shalene quickly corrected them, saying to drop the formalities. Here, he wasn't the son of a duke, just another applicant with no title. He assured them not to worry, claiming it was merely a fair fight that he would handle personally. But as he examined his blade, he discovered a thin crack marring its surface. This was a sword forged from high-grade mithril. He had completely underestimated Ronin's abilities. To think that he could damage such a blade? A bitter smile crossed his face as he vowed to remember that name. The next day, deep in a forest outside the capital, Ronin and Aesel navigated by map. Ronin swore they were close.
Aesel couldn't help but ask if what they did was truly all right, his mind still on yesterday's fight.
He'd heard that man was the heir to a powerful ducal family, but Ronin just shrugged, saying the guy was a good person, just obsessed with swords. In fact, he was a model nobleman, a true protector of the weak. Ronin reminded Aesel that what happened was a fair duel. If it hadn't been, they would have been locked in a cell by now. Aesel had to agree when he thought about it that way. It all made sense. Ronin's thoughts, however, were on the mana source they'd found, a wellspring circulating for reasons unknown. He knew its value was astronomical. Most people would kill to monopolize such a thing. And yet, the professor had generously given them this information, all for the simple task of cracking an egg. He turned to Aesel, asking if he felt anything different. Aesel admitted he'd never seen so much mana concentrated in one place. He felt it surge within him, realizing he could use magic freely here. At the same time, Maria noted the egg in his pocket was reacting again. She explained it was absorbing the ambient magic at a frightening speed, as if it was feasting on the dense mana of the forest. Ronin nodded in understanding, a wistful thought crossing his mind that Mariah would have loved a place like this. Aesel fell silent for a moment, his eyes fixed on the shimmering source of power. Then, a strange thought struck him. The professor said this place was teeming with mana, home to all kinds of mystical creatures. That meant even normal wildlife should be drawn to this area. So he asked a chilling question. Why was the forest completely silent? Only then did it hit Ronin. He had been far too relaxed. It seemed trouble had a way of finding him, no matter where he went. He warned Aesel to get ready. The thick stench of blood was heavy in the air. A shiver went down Aesel's spine when Ronin spoke of the scent of blood. Ronin added that someone had gotten here before them. And as visitors, that could only mean one thing, invaders. Suddenly, a volley of arrows rained down upon them. Ronin's sword was out in a flash, a blur of steel deflecting the deadly projectiles. As he parried, he recognized the arrows. They were the same type used back at the squad camp. He recalled a certain man bragging about their power. This man boasted they could blow the heads off most orcs. After showing them off, he'd arrogantly asked the captain if he wanted a few. For someone who was caught using them on an illegal hunt, he had some nerve talking at all. But the man continued his praise, claiming that anyone who used them over 100 times became an elite hunter of his organization, Caliboro's hunting dog. Ronin remembered the name with disdain, thinking how pathetic it was to call yourself a dog. He yelled at Aesel to take cover, warning him not to become an easy target. Then he shot forward like an arrow, declaring he had something to take care of. The ambushers watched as their target began to move. They saw him weave through the mana-infused arrows with a single blade. He moved through the trees like a phantom until he was right upon them. The leader gave a sharp order: spread out and pin him down. Ronin noted their decision-making was shockingly fast. Perhaps these were a different breed from the thugs he'd faced before. Realizing a direct fight would be a bad move, he suddenly shouted for them to halt their attack, asking if they didn't recognize an ally. Had they truly never heard of him? He declared, the new hunting dog of the Demacy lineage. A wave of confusion spread through the men. Could this kid really be a hunting dog? They stared in disbelief, unable to accept that a boy could hold such a fearsome title. Ronin sneered. If they didn't believe him, they could go ask the wolf of the lineage themselves. Then he offered them a little warning. Assuming others can't do what you're incapable of, he said, his voice dripping with contempt, is a terrible habit. You dogs, there is nothing more pathetic. One of the men grabbed the leader's shirt, enraged that a child was humiliating them, asking if he should just cut off the boy's arms. But another member urged him to calm down. He shouldn't be dismissed just because he's a child. He pointed out that Ronin seemed to understand their inner workings, speaking with authority on Caliboro's system, a system only they should know. He'd better confirm with the captain. If the kid wasn't lying, crossing the Damus lineage would be a death sentence. Just then, a sharp voice cut through the air. I told you all to stay quiet. What is all this commotion? The one who arrived was their captain, the wolf of the Demoth Fiv Pack. A subordinate quickly explained. Captain, this brat claims he's one of ours.
Ronin sized up the situation. The fact that the pack's leader was here meant his entire hunt was gathered in one place.
The captain glared at the boy. You're a Hyote from the Damus lineage. Ronin's reply was a simple, confident, yes. The captain's eyes narrowed in suspicion. Odd. What are you doing here? This part of the mountain belongs to us.
A cold smirk played on Ronin's lips. I wouldn't know. I'm not a Hyote. In a flash, his sword was drawn, already slicing through the air.
He had only used the clan's name as a cover, the perfect disguise for an illegal hunter. And with that one lie, a head had already rolled. He lunged toward the captain and ended him in a single, fluid motion.
He then turned to the thug who had started the trouble. I warned you. You would regret this. A swift slice later, several fingers fell to the dirt.
The man fell to his knees, screaming in agony. Ronin tossed a leaf before him. If you want to live, pick that up and start drawing the location of every lineage you know. The tip of Ronin's sword pressed closer. Is there a problem? Perhaps you don't want to. In that case, I have no reason to keep you alive. The young man desperately pleaded. I'll do anything, but I have nothing to draw with. Ronin's voice was ice. I've already made you a pen. He gestured to the man's mangled right hand, the very one he'd taken the fingers from. After reviewing the bloody map, Ronin smirked. Your drawings are quite good. You're a very talented young man. The thug looked up, hopeful. Then, will you spare me, as you promised? Ronin put a hand in his pocket. Of course, he said with a chilling smile. I have no intention of keeping you alive. After walking a good distance, Aesel started to feel exhausted.
Stop exaggerating, Ronin said. I told you to be prepared, Aesel protested. This is too much. Was all this massacre really Caliboro's work?
Ronin's reply was grim. Letting scum like that live is the real crime here, he added. Don't worry, Aesel. They were wanted criminals who needed to be eliminated. Suddenly, they both froze, their eyes widening in disbelief. The drops of blood from the slain beasts began to rise, defying gravity and forming a swirling particle. That particle grew massive in an instant, taking the terrifying shape of a giant crimson wave. Not knowing what this dark magic was, Ronin reached for his sword. But before he could, the egg in his pocket began to react, shooting out on its own. It flew straight into the center of the bloody wave and began absorbing everything. Aesel watched in horror. What is happening? Don't ask me, Ronin replied. But one thing was clear, whatever was inside that egg was no ordinary being. The egg devoured every last drop of the enormous, bloody wave. Is it over? Aesel asked, his voice trembling. It seems so, Ronin said. But I doubt it's that simple. He was right. The egg started to crack. It levitated, and glowing fissures spread across its surface. Aesel seemed worried about what might emerge, but Ronin was thrilled. Finally, it's hatching. A huge hole shattered open in the eggshell. He leaned in to see what was inside. When the creature shot out and smacked him right on the nose,
There was no time to get a good look. All he saw was a flash of wings. It had to be a dream bird.
but as Ronin observed it more closely, he wasn't so sure. Aesel gasped. It looks like a tiny dragon. It's so similar to the one we saw in the book. He remembered the drawing of a beautiful little blue bird. He had no idea where this thing absorbed enough mana to become so strange. Petting the newborn creature, he admitted. Well, at least you're cute. But his tone soured. Still, was a headbutt really the best greeting you could think of? The tiny creature formed a seal with its paws and cast it at Ronin. In an instant, he realized his wounds were completely gone. Aesel stared in amazement. It can use healing magic? A satisfied smile crept onto Ronin's face. This little creature had more abilities than he could have imagined. Aesel suggested. We should give it a name. We can't just keep calling it a dream bird. As he was thinking, feeling that no name would truly fit. The creature's ears twitched. It had heard something. It shot towards the sky and took off in a blur. Where did it go all of a sudden? Aesel cried out. Ronin watched its flight path. It seems to have sensed a presence. Elsewhere, a wanderer from the Demir branch was running for his life, completely clueless about what was going on. He had only left for a moment to run an errand. But when he returned, everyone was dead. He had witnessed the horrifying wave of blood that looked more like an ocean. Now, something was hunting him. He tripped over a tree root and crashed to the ground. Suddenly, the tiny dragon-like bird appeared above him and began to suck his blood. The man screamed in terror as the creature fed relentlessly. Ronin's voice cut through the forest. Stop! Don't make me kill you on the day you were born. So, your name will be Sita? Acela asked warmly. He nodded. Yes, it's a name I've had in mind. Then, he turned to the tiny creature. What do you think? The young man on the ground stared up in disbelief. That presence. It was the same man from before. Could he be the master of that creature? He cautiously approached the fallen man. Blaris, are you all right? The young man coughed. Yes, I'm alive. Thanks to you. He reached out a trembling hand. But who are you, and how do you know my name? A cold blade pressed against his throat. You don't need to know. Ronin's voice was ice, a flash of memory from the night before. The young man's eyes, he gasped. You're the Houndmaster of Calaboro. My rank was lower back then, Ronin stated flatly. And just so we're clear, I have a task for you. Tossing a few gold coins, he smirked. This turned out better than expected. Aesel had to agree. He scooped up some of the liquid that had miraculously turned to gold, his expression completely baffled. Ronin couldn't help but wonder why Maria's father offered such a massive reward. Thanks to him, their money troubles were over, though they still owed Professor Vaughn a great deal. They had only gone there to express their gratitude, to thank him for everything and introduce him to Sita. Little did they know, their simple visit was about to become a full-blown business trip. But beyond the task involving Blaris, there was the map from that so-called hunting dog. This was becoming far more complex than a simple thank you. He'd terrified the man so thoroughly. He was certain Blarus wouldn't dare step out of line. Aesel looked at the gold. Ronin, what will you do with all this? He explained. The top-ranking students are exempt from the Academy's tuition fees. Still, there was something else he needed this money for. And with the entrance ceremony fast approaching, time was running out. A few days later, at the carriage station in the city of Valon. We have arrived, my lady, the driver announced to the young woman. Her eyes lit up with pure wonder. The capital. It was more amazing than she had ever dreamed. You must be exhausted from the journey, Ronin greeted her warmly. Beaming, she rushed to his side. Did anything unusual happen while I was away? He asked. I should be asking you that, she exclaimed. I nearly fainted when a high-class carriage stopped in front of our house. How is that even possible? She pinched his cheeks affectionately. You've gotten so thin, have you been eating properly? His reassurance calmed her down, but then her gaze fell upon a small creature perched on his shoulder. Oh, what is that adorable little thing? She asked. Ronin smiled. This is Sita. He's my new traveling companion. His tone grew serious. But more importantly, we must hurry. We don't have much time. There's something I absolutely must do. Moments later, they stood inside an incredibly luxurious boutique. She knew he had earned the money for the academy. Even so, a gift like this felt far too extravagant. Ronin casually addressed the clerk. Please have everything she tried on delivered. His sister gasped, overjoyed by the sheer number of beautiful clothes. It's not that much, he said. In fact, let's buy some more. Her heart swelled with pride. Her little brother had truly grown into a fine man. She twirled around the shop, shouting with pure joy. My little brother is the kindest person in the entire world. So, where are we off to next? She asked. A few places, he replied. My sword was damaged a few days ago. As he opened the door to leave, a familiar voice called out to him. Ronin, are you finished in there? Ronin froze in place, his heart nearly leaping out of his chest. He never, ever expected to see him here. What are you doing here? Are you stalking me? The man sputtered. What? No, I was just picking up my... And could you please stop with the disrespectful attitude, he added.
That's exactly what a stalker would say, Ronin shot back. The man bristled. You claim my sword was defective? And whose fault do you think that is?
I truly wish you could have proven such a defect if it existed. Suddenly, Ronin's sister stepped forward, her expression stern. Ronin, how many times must I tell you not to use such foul language?
But he started it, Ronin protested, which only made things worse as he realized he'd just talked back to her.
She turned to the young man with an apologetic smile. Please forgive him. My brother has a sharp tongue but a kind heart. You must have been very shocked. But he hardly hurt her. To him, she was like a goddess descended from the heavens. It was my fault, she insisted, for not disciplining him properly.
Schlieffen, completely mesmerized, took all the blame. Not at all. It was entirely my lack of discretion.
Everything that happened is my responsibility. Please rest assured. She took his hands warmly. Knowing Ronin has a friend like you makes me so happy, she pleaded. Please take good care of my little brother. Blushing furiously, the young man swore he would. Ronin, on the other hand, looked utterly miserable with this new development. Still bright red, the young man addressed Ronin. First, I will compensate you for the sword. I don't have the gold with me at this moment. So please accept this crest as proof of my identity and my family's promise. He explained it could be used anywhere in the Empire, and for a sword. The blacksmith at the end of the street was the only place to go. It was a legendary forge, boasting a 500-year legacy. A place no commoner would ever dare to enter. With a knowing smile, he wished them luck in crafting a worthy blade. Arriving there, Iroh realized that mysterious man knew exactly what he was doing. Iroh mused that with the seal of Grandia, he could probably buy this entire village outright. He couldn't believe this was the same Schlieffen he thought he knew. The next day, at the Academy's entrance ceremony, the principal declared it was a pleasure to welcome the newcomers, introducing himself as Principal Crayer. As the principal's voice echoed, Maria, Ronin, and Aesel stood together, listening intently.
Schlieffen, owing to his high status, was positioned near the front, close to the professors.
The principal concluded with a grand promise that each of them would one day become a part of the Empire's glorious history. He congratulated them all for joining and officially addressed Class 787, while Ronin, lost in the crowd, let out a bored yawn. His sister, attending as a guest, was already moved to tears. The moment the speech ended, the principal snapped his fingers, and a multicolored light erupted around them.
A wave of dizziness washed over everyone as reality itself began to distort.
The sky seemed to crack like glass, and in a flash, they were all standing in the center of a massive arena. A voice boomed, "A pleasure to meet you, freshmen!" Had he truly teleported the entire ceremony with a single snap? The principal announced that the ceremony had reached its climax. It was time for the meeting between veterans and freshmen. This was the legendary first encounter, a tradition pitting newcomers against the formidable second-year students. The process was known to be intense, a special event that defined one's start at the academy. The rules were simple. The top-ranked freshmen would represent their class, each facing one of 4 second-year veterans with unique fighting styles. From there, a series of one-on-one battles would unfold. The principal warned them that this event's outcome was directly tied to their evaluation by the academy's instructors. He believed this trial by fire would forge their skills, claiming that healthy competition was the foundation of true education. Ronin's sister watched with worry, wondering if this brutal duel could truly be called educational. Of course, the principal added, the freshmen may choose their opponents. Refusing the duel is also an option, so do not feel intimidated. Freshman representatives, the stage is yours. The second year's first rank was Nando. The second was a man named Brown. The third ranked was Arena, and the fourth was named Karen. Their eyes locked onto Ronin. A hunger for battle barely contained. He glanced at his sister. Since things had come to this, he might as well put on a show for her. And perhaps it was a good chance to foster some camaraderie. He heard the freshmen could choose their opponents. Raising his hand, he asked if he could make a suggestion. The principal raised an eyebrow, asking what he proposed. Ronin declared that since the choice was free, he'd like to be taught by all the veterans. A wave of disbelief washed over the crowd. To add to the shock, he clarified his demand he wanted to fight all four of them, together, at the same time. Such an unprecedented request required discussion. The instructors quickly gathered to share their opinions. The principal turned to Professor Nabarros, asking for her thoughts on Ronin's audacious proposal. The academy lived by one rule: if you had the skill, you could do as you pleased. The outcome of this duel would send a powerful message to everyone. She gave her approval, promising the principal she would intervene personally if things got too dangerous. After a moment of thought, the principal made his decision. The unprecedented match would proceed. The four veterans seethed. The sheer arrogance of this boy was absurd. Someone warned them to be careful. Despite his arrogance, Schlieffen was undeniably skilled. He was an opponent they couldn't afford to underestimate. They agreed to go all out from the very beginning.
Errol felt the atmosphere was spiraling into chaos.
She yelled to her brother that he could give up at any time if it felt too dangerous. He simply gave her a reassuring wave. The principal's voice boomed across the arena, giving the order to begin the first match between the veterans and the freshmen. The first veteran, Nando, charged forward with explosive force, aiming to end the freshman in a single blow. But Ronin sidestepped, easily avoiding the strike. He thought to himself, "Not bad." They were several levels above Maria. The next to attack was Arena, but he calmly blocked her assault.
"Arena, duck!" Karen shouted, unleashing his own strike. Yet even with two attacking at once, Ronin was unfazed. Parrying their blows and noting their teamwork wasn't half bad.
To escape the pincer attack, he blocked both strikes at once, the force sending him flying backward. As he landed in a crouch, he sensed another attack coming. "What are you doing?" Brun roared as he descended upon him. He craved a true battle of steel, but he never imagined Ronin's blade was a blur of motion, with a storm of attacks right behind it. This was no game. They formed a strategy, a pincer movement to corner their arrogant opponent. When they were all poised to strike, their blades met nothing but air. He was already gone. Arena watched, astonished by his speed. The Philian Academy, he thought, was truly on another level. Before the three of them could even comprehend it, they each felt a bone-jarring impact. Of the four he targeted, only three were struck down directly. Braun was strong. Ronin had to admit it. This fight should have already been over. But he would grant his senior respect until the very end. And so, the two warriors readied their stances, preparing for the final clash. However, the moment Braun saw Ronin's new posture, he knew the boy wasn't holding back anymore. Ronin was thirsting for victory, ready to end this now. That stance? It was the very same one Instructor Nabaros used. Ronin saw the flicker of fear in his opponent's eyes, and a faint smile crossed his lips as he flashed past him. The senior's sword was not strong enough to withstand the blow, and with that, Ronin stood victorious, having defeated four upperclassmen, remarking only that he had learned a great deal. The entire arena erupted. They couldn't believe what this simple freshman had done. They roared that the first year was an absolute monster. Everyone thought he was going to lose, but it was over in a heartbeat. Could he truly be a new student? Nasdo admitted it was so one-sided. He wasn't even upset about losing. They all had to agree. The boy was a beast. Ronin's gaze found his sister, realizing this would finally earn her trust. Now, he just had to prove he was skilled with words as well. "You all fought well," he told them. He bowed slightly, a gesture of pure respect. "I have learned much from you all," he said. He claimed he was just caught up in the Academy's challenge, but their strength was the real deal. He spoke from the very bottom of his heart, thanking them for accepting his selfish challenge. He politely asked their forgiveness for his brash attitude and said he looked forward to learning even more from them. They stepped back, whispering amongst themselves about the boy. It was unanimous. They had completely misjudged him. He wasn't just strong, he was respectful. Brown grabbed his arm, his voice full of admiration. You fought honorably, using only your skills to win. He squeezed his arm firmly. That is the attitude every student in this academy should aspire to. He declared that Ronin was truly amazing, and Arena added that his stamina was off the charts.
Ronin was satisfied. He had shown his sister his diplomatic side. She wouldn't have to worry about him now. Meanwhile, a mysterious girl found him
He was sitting in the grand hall during the welcome banquet. Aesel looked around, overwhelmed. This place is massive, Maria scoffed. This is the greatest institution in the land. This is the least we should expect. Aesel then asked Ronin if he had seen his sister. He replied that he had, and that it took some time to comfort her, since she was so worried about him. He mentioned that he even left Sita with her, so he wouldn't have to worry about her safety. Aesel thought he was an incredible brother, and I had to agree. Of course he is. Just as Ronin was about to pick up a piece of meat from his plate, a voice slithered up beside him. Do you really believe you have the luxury to eat right now? Looking to his side and seeing that face, Ronin couldn't believe it. Not him. Not again. Ronin's temper flared. He slammed his fork down, cracking his plate. What is it that you want this time? Schlieffen remained calm. It's nothing major. I merely wish to check on something important. With a notebook in hand, he began, Where does Arena reside, and is it a great distance from here? He wanted to know about the condition of the roads, the level of security, and if there were any reports of local incidents. He assumed Ronin had hired an escort, trusting it was at least the size of a mercenary army. Ronin's patience was wearing thin. I hired people far stronger than you can possibly imagine. Unless a wyvern drops from the sky, nothing will happen. Schlieffen concluded his notes. So, if a wyvern were to appear, something could indeed happen. Ronin's agitation grew with every passing second. Why does my sister's life concern you so much? Who do you think you are? Schlieffen replied coolly. I am merely worried about a girl who has become my friend. It is the duty of a knight. A new voice suddenly interjected. This scene is quite interesting. I've never seen the Grantia wolf be so talkative before. In a tone that was anything but friendly, Schlieffen asked, What do you want with me? The woman who appeared, exuding an air of importance, was Elizabeth Akalusha. She told him not to be mistaken. You are not the one who holds my interest. He is... Her gaze fell on Ronin, who was startled. He pointed at himself and asked, Me. He asked why him. Schlieffen simply said it must be her annoying habit rearing its head again. He told Akalusha that he was finished there, so she could do as she pleased. Still unsatisfied, he turned to Ronin. Should I dispatch my family's guards to protect her? Ronin's voice was cold. Leave. This doesn't concern you. Aesel frantically warned him. That's the woman from before. But Ronin gave a slight nod. There was no need for explanations. He could feel her overwhelming, terrifying power. Akalushia spoke, her words laced with aristocratic grace. Those who bear their claws must be taught a lesson. She smiled. I'm sure you understand what I mean. I've taken a great interest in your talent, she continued. So, I will make you an offer. A special offer that a mere criminal could never even dream of receiving. She revealed a necklace, a radiant violet stone resting at its center. This was the legendary invitation from House Akalusha, a family utterly different from the other nobles who worshipped their bloodlines. For them, talent was absolute. They gave those with true potential a chance to become one of their own. The symbol of that golden opportunity was this very necklace, with its flawless violet jewel. Ronin's eyes narrowed. Are you even allowed to give that to someone? She laughed softly. If you're asking, then you already know the answer. He remembered a rumor he'd overheard in passing. And just like that, his mind flashed back to another life, to a conversation with his commander. She had shown him that same invitation, her voice full of promise. With this, even a commoner can become part of a great family. When he'd asked if it was like the great commander's own rise, she had replied, yes. His commander was Adashin Akalusha. She told him he would, of course, have to pass a test given by the patriarch. But with his talent, that would be a trivial matter. Keep this in mind, she had said. Once you atone for your sins through your deeds in the war, you might just receive one of these. I see that much talent in you. Snapping back to the present, his eyes locked onto the necklace that symbolized the Akalusha's invitation. Since you already know of it, she said smoothly, I won't waste my breath explaining. I trust you will make the right choice. Just then, Elizabeth's voice cut in, sharp and condescending. Even if born a beast, if you stay near sheep long enough, you might just become one. With that parting shot, she and her followers swept away. Asa let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Ronin mused to himself that the twins truly did as they pleased. Still, at least he had made a valuable contact. The Akalusia family could be incredibly useful. In this academy, everything was decided by rank, and one's atmosphere could change in the blink of an eye. The clearest proof of this was the dormitory system. Intermediate-level students were placed in the Neon Hall. Each person was given a pristine room and access to a high-level cafeteria. It was an incredible dorm with every possible amenity. Meanwhile, on the first day at Crater Hall, the lowest-tier dorm, the air was filled with the shouts of nobles. Why do we have to stay in a place like this? The person in charge could only apologize, explaining there were no servants assigned to Crater Hall.
4 people were crammed into a single room, sharing a cafeteria, shower, and bathroom. The staff could do nothing about their complaints.
These are the academy rules, they'd say. Just study hard, and you will leave this place.
Otherwise, you'll be spending another semester right here.
Finally, the best students, Ronin among them, were placed in Naberfoser Hall, which could be summed up in one sentence. It was simply on another level. Aesel was utterly stunned by their luxurious room. Ronin, however, picked up the notes detailing the available classes. He needed to choose the courses he was most interested in and wished to attend. Most first years were warned not to choose too many courses, as adjusting was critical. It was a common misunderstanding for those who had yet to experience the academy's hell. Ronin's eyes lit up with excitement as he chose nearly every single one. If he was here, he was going to learn everything. On the very first day, he was exempted from the basic swordsmanship class. The instructor declared there was nothing more he could possibly teach him, as Ronin's performance was already flawless.
According to academy rules, if a student had mastered the curriculum, they were exempted. Keeping him there would only discourage the other students and destroy their motivation.
So, he was dismissed. He ended up sitting by a lake. His sword plunged into the ground beside him. He felt a deep sadness. He couldn't believe this was all an academy of this caliber had to offer. He was exempted from target practice, then from monster hunting, until he was expelled from all of his classes. Frustrated, he thought that this place was nothing like he had imagined. Just then, a voice called out, "You look familiar. Shouldn't you be in class?"
When Ronin turned around, he saw it was Instructor Nabaros.
From his expression, she could tell everything. "You've already finished all the classes, haven't you?" he replied sadly. "Yes, I have. Is this really how all the classes are going to be? I thought the academy would be better than this." She understood immediately. He was a genius who could replicate her techniques with a single glance. "As your instructor," she declared, her eyes glinting, "I cannot turn a blind eye to such talent. Give me your sword." She took one look at it, then asked him what he thought before teaching him a very important lesson. Gazing at his now broken sword, she said, "Something like this cannot be called a weapon. It will only hinder its user's true power. Watch closely," she commanded, her hand resting gently on her sword. As she drew the blade, he held his breath. A single, fluid strike sent the lake's water soaring into the heavens, creating a torrential downpour around them. Her eyes met his. "Do you see what was missing?" she asked. "A sword is just hard, sharp metal, a tool for fighting your enemies." Ronin had always seen them as disposable, but her flawless technique shattered that belief. It was utter perfection. It seemed impossible. He was certain her blade was no different from his. The form, the cut, it was all the same. But how could the raw power be on a completely different level? Just because of the weapon? That waste of strength, she explained, is what decides whether you live or die. For a mana user, a weapon that resonates with you is everything. It's a concept you can't grasp yet, since you don't use mana. His eyes widened. "You already knew." "Yes," she confirmed. "But the sheer amount of energy you possess is truly incredible. One day, your mana will awaken. To properly wield that power, you will need a true weapon." She saw his confusion. "I know you must have a lot on your mind. Join me for my class," she offered. He hesitated. "But isn't that only for second-year students and above?" She simply smiled. "Just leave that piece of metal behind, and bring a real sword." On his first day off from classes, Ronin, accompanied by Estelle and Maria, went on a search.
They arrived at the place Schlieffen had mentioned, a forge marked by a noble crest. Maria looked skeptical. It seems a bit run down. The building looked like it could collapse at any moment. Are you sure this is the place a renowned family would use?
We'll know once we're inside, Ronin replied. But upon entering, the reality was even worse. This was no joke. Suddenly, a door slammed open. It's too noisy, a gruff voice roared. I'm trying to sleep.
Who are you people? He bellowed. Why are you making so much noise? Can't you see the fire is out?
A beast man in a forge was an interesting sight, but his foul mood was unmistakable. Are you all deaf? He growled. State your business and do it quickly. Ronin calmly presented the family crest. Schlieffen sent us. He said the finest weapons are made here. The beastman's eyes narrowed, instantly recognizing the symbol of the Grania family. But his rude demeanor didn't falter. You think showing me that trinket makes you part of the Grania family? I don't know who leaked information about this place, he sneered. But we don't accept customers like you. Ronin's anger flared. I'm not leaving without a sword. The beastman licked his lips. There is another way. Just give me that little boy's arm. I'm getting hungry, he taunted. His eyes locked on Aesel. Why not offer it up? He wanted to devour Aesel's arm. Aesel paled, stammering that he probably didn't taste good. But Ronin's voice cut through the tension, cold as steel. You've just crossed the line. He unsheathed his sword and launched a devastating strike. But just as it was about to connect, something was wrong. Armor had appeared out of nowhere. The beastman was now wearing armor that had materialized the instant he was attacked. Clutching his sword, Ronin's resolve hardened. It doesn't matter what you are. I just need to cut through it all. Wait, hold on a moment, the beastman shouted. It was just a test. Ronin paused, his eyes full of suspicion. A test. It's a protocol for all new customers, he explained quickly. A way to test their abilities. And this new invisible armor.
So I provoked you on purpose, he admitted. I had no intention of actually hurting any of you.
Ronin wasn't buying it. The beastman sighed. If you have any doubts, you can speak with Schlieffen later. That sounds like a good process for a calm death, Aesel muttered under his breath. The beastman scrambled to explain that wasn't the case. He turned to Aesel with an apologetic look. My apologies, friend. I don't really hurt people, so there's no need to worry. Anyway, the name's DDT. He introduced himself. I'm an apprentice at this forge, and sometimes the gatekeeper. And you are? He asked. Ronin, came the reply. So, Ronin, you're looking for a weapon. DD grinned. Then follow me. This is just the entrance. The real forge is much deeper inside. He led them to a large platform. Are you ready? Prepare yourselves. With a grin, he pressed a hidden button. Massive gears began to grind and turn. The platform lurched, and they began to descend into the darkness below.
What is this? Ronin asked, amazed. An elevator, made with a magic stone and a pulley. Didite beamed. Welcome to the biggest and best forge in the capital.
This is Carpadoki. Aesel stared in utter disbelief. He never could have imagined something so magnificent existed underground. Get excited. Didite clapped Ronin on the shoulder. You passed the test, so now I get to take you to the best blacksmith in the entire capital. Ronin was speechless. He never imagined a place so vast and complete could possibly exist. To think a secret world of master craftsmen was hidden just beneath the capital's streets. Looking around, he saw a breathtaking sight, a legendary forge. Crafting masterpieces exclusively for royalty and the highest nobility. All the greatest masters were gathered here. However, even among these geniuses, one name reigned supreme, the elder dwarf, who called this forge his home. He was a true master, having spent centuries communing with fire and steel. Dedekon warned that while the old man was notoriously difficult, his skills were beyond compare. Kicking the door open with blatant disrespect, Dedekon burst in, bellowing for the old master. He strode past countless weapons on the ground, announcing that he'd brought a guest. A gruff voice echoed from the forge's depths, saying that such a ruckus at the entrance could only mean Dedekon had arrived. He grumbled that he'd told him to work in silence, but that the boy never listened. Dedekon tried to justify himself, claiming he had no choice. The doorway was cluttered with weapons, making a quiet entrance impossible. He fired back, saying the elder, Dawn, complained far too much. The elder sighed, declaring that if Dedekon brought guests, he'd assume they weren't entirely worthless. With immense pride, Dedekon announced he had personally tested them, and that their swordsmanship was magnificent. The elder seemed surprised. He eyed Ronin, who looked like a mere boy. The elder demanded, "Show me your skill. A man's entire worth can be seen in a single swing of his sword." As Ronin began to unsheath his weapon, the master blacksmith Darren's eyes narrowed, focusing intently on the blade. Then his expression turned to disgust. "What is this piece of trash?" he roared. "You dare carry this? And call it a weapon." In a flash, the blacksmith struck Ronin's sword with a hammer, shattering it to pieces. Ronin stared in shock, then fury. "What are you doing?" he yelled. The master pointed to the arsenal around them. "Use any of these swords. With a blade that pathetic, you can't possibly show your true strength."
"Whatever you choose, I'll give it to you for free," he declared. "So don't feel like you've been wronged."
He then added that any weapon in his forge would be hundreds of times better than that piece of junk. Ronin said nothing, his gaze simply flickering between the two dwarves. He knew this was an unbelievable opportunity, but he wondered if a different sword could truly make that much of a difference. Stepping forward, he warned, "Don't blame me if something here gets broken." The elder just laughed, saying he didn't care what he destroyed. "All I want," the master said, "is for you to show me the greatest strike of your life." In that moment, Ronin recalled the ultimate technique his own teacher had performed. He took a deep, centering breath and began to emulate the form. The instant he saw the stance, the elder's eyes shot wide open with recognition. Then, Ronin unleashed his attack. It was a perfect, blinding strike that sent a pillar of light into the sky, visible for miles around. From another forge, the other blacksmiths worriedly looked toward the commotion at Elder Dawn's. It wasn't even noon, and he was already causing a massive disturbance. Seeing the damage, they assumed one of his furnaces must have exploded. Even Ronin himself was stunned by the sheer devastation he had caused. "What was that?" he whispered. The elder's voice was filled with awe. "That technique, it belongs to Nabara." He stared at Ronin intently. "Are you her apprentice?" When Ronin asked if he knew instructor Nabaros, the elder boomed with pride. "I am the one who forged her sword." Ronin's interest was immediately piqued. That legendary sword was famous for its impossibly great length. Elder Dawn confirmed it was the mysterious blade she wielded. It was one of the few true masterpieces he had ever forged in his entire lifetime. He admitted he'd mistaken Ronin for a mere novice, unable to see his true skill. It had been a long, long time since he'd encountered someone with so much raw talent. But, Elder Darren confessed, such incredible talent created a new problem. It would be extremely difficult to forge a weapon worthy of him. As he could clearly see, none of the swords in the forge could withstand a single one of his strikes. Ronin asked what they should do. "I will need a legendary material," he said. "Something like a byproduct from a wyvern." Ronin reached into his pouch and took something out. "How about this?" He confessed he wasn't sure if it would be useful, but he had brought it just in case. Elder Darren found the eggshell peculiar, but when he tested it, he was shocked to find that his mithril hammer couldn't even leave a scratch on it. To think such a material truly existed, he was utterly fascinated. "Are you certain you want me to use something this valuable?" he asked. Ronin said it was useless to him in its current form. "Yes," Dunn exclaimed. "This will be enough. Come back in 2 weeks. I will create the greatest sword in the Empire for you," he promised. Ronin was already looking forward to his return. Ronin then turned to his companions, asking why they didn't go find other masters to help them. But Dunn stopped them. "I cannot send the friends of such a valuable talent away empty-handed. While I can't forge for you, I can at least smelt that material." The 3 travelers were deeply impressed by the old master's passionate determination. Far below them, a group of figures in white cloaks looked up, annoyed by the brilliant light. They wanted to incinerate everything on the spot, but one of them urged restraint. It wasn't yet time to reveal themselves. "Soon," he hissed, "they could start with these ignorant black. They seemed to be guarding massive stone monsters. On the day the light finally awakens, the leader vowed, everything in this empire will disappear, consumed by its brilliant glow." Days passed. As Ronin strolled aimlessly, the blacksmith's words echoed in his mind the greatest sword in the entire empire. Both Azel and Maria had already commissioned their own weapons from other smiths. The cost would be steep, but that was hardly a concern. After all, it wasn't his money. The only real problem was the agonizing wait for his own blade to be forged. What could he even do until then Acela and Maria were both tied up in their classes? Lost in thought, his feet led him to a familiar place, the training center,
which held exclusive classes for veterans at the Galilean facility. He knew this was exactly where instructor Nabaros held her brutal training sessions. She'd ordered him to return with a proper weapon, but his temporary blade would have to do. Just as he decided to go in, a familiar presence loomed right beside him. He turned his head slowly and offered a greeting. Her response was a sharp and painful tug on his ear. "How long has it been? I recall telling you to show up the moment you were armed. Are you trying to skip my class?" With that, she began dragging him by the ear. He scrambled to explain that there was a good reason, but she cut him off. "Forget it, just follow me. You can make your excuses on the way." He shouted back that he understood and pleaded for her to let go. But their little commotion hadn't gone unnoticed. Peeking through a window, a young woman wondered what all the fuss was about. Suddenly, a young man slammed into her. "Why are you blocking my path?" She immediately apologized, saying she was just a bit distracted. It was Carden. "If you have time to stand around gawking, you have time for class, loser." She scurried away at his words. Inside the first duel room, the instructor was introducing Ronin. This one has already caused quite a stir. "Let me introduce him properly. From this day forward, he will be joining our class." Ronin bowed his head. "I'm a first-year martial arts student. It is an honor to train with you all." One of the students scoffed. "Isn't that the first year who somehow took the top rank? He looks more like a baby than a warrior." Ronin heard the insult loud and clear. Some faces in the crowd seemed friendly, but many others were openly hostile. Just then, a girl rushed in, apologizing for being late. Ronin's eyes widened. He recognized that voice. "I had something to take care of," she stammered, looking nervous. "I am so sorry for my tardiness." The instructor waved it off. "It's fine. I was just introducing the newcomer." The assistant approached with a kind smile. "It's a pleasure to meet you. Ronin, my name is Adishan, a second-year student and the assistant for this class." It was a pleasure to meet her. But in his mind, he saw the future great commander Adishan Akalushia, the legendary Iron Lady. They said she had pure iron flowing through her veins, not blood. Who could imagine that such a fearsome commander could possess such a gentle smile? Of course, this version of her had no memories of his regression. This was the true Adishan, before destiny twisted her path. He remembered her final plea from his past life, begging him not to let her do anything stupid, wishing she had become a tailor instead. He didn't know what to do. A serious problem was unfolding before him. The way everyone here treated her. It was like she was their slave. She was running herself ragged, handling every single task. That's when Carden swaggered up to Ronin. "How about a duel?" Before Ronin could even ask why, Carden smirked. "No reason. I just feel like it." "The name's Carden, a third year. I've heard the rumors about your so-called incredible performance during the exam." "If those rumors are even half true, I'd love to learn from you." But Ronin simply shook his head. "I'm busy with something else." Carden's polite facade cracked. "You're calling me out for a duel, yet you don't even have a weapon." He then spun around and yelled, "Hey, loser, bring me my practice spear." She flinched and replied, Right away." Ronin's blood began to boil, hearing him use that word, especially coming from someone who looked more like a wild animal than a man. She quickly brought the weapon over. He slapped it aside. "You idiot. This is the long spear. I've been using the short one for weeks. Are you talking back to me? How can an assistant be this incompetent?" And with that, he began to strike her on the head, again and again. "You don't even deserve to be in this class. You only got in because you begged and groveled. Are you really that stupid, or is it all an act?" Her apologies were useless. He didn't stop. That was enough. Ronin snatched the spear from his hand, his eyes burning with cold fury. "You wanted a duel. You've got one, because if we don't settle this now, I can't guarantee what I'll do to you." Carden stared back, stunned. "What are you talking about? Which part didn't you understand?" Ronin's gaze was like daggers. "We settle this. With a duel." The sudden challenge shocked Carden. "Did I hear you correctly? What's gotten into you all of a sudden?" His eyes narrowed. "Don't tell me. All this is because of that loser. You don't even know who she is." He laughed with contempt. "Is it because you're both commoners? A little solidarity? Or perhaps you're siblings and I just didn't realize it?" Ronin tossed the staff forward. "Enough talk. Let's begin." If he didn't want to die, he'd have to face the cold tip of the staff pressed against his chest. Carden was stunned. How could he generate such raw power without a single trace of mana? In a flash,
Ronin sent him flying across the training ground. You complained about the spear's length, Ronin mocked. So I shortened it for you. He glared at Carden, who clutched the shattered remains of his weapon. Having fun yet? But Carden's pride was shattered. How dare this nobody humiliate him? Rage exploded from within. I'll show you the place for trash like you. He charged forward, bellowing with fury, while Ronin just watched him come, completely unfazed. You think you can get away with this? Carden roared. Ronin effortlessly parried the attack. Oh, I'll get away with it, he said calmly. You should worry more about yourself. He struck him hard, a brutal lesson in humility. The blow landed square on his jaw, followed by another, and another. A relentless barrage of strikes overwhelmed him, blow after crushing blow, until his opponent finally collapsed onto the dusty ground. Ronin looked down at the fallen noble. Be grateful we're at the academy, he stated coldly. Anywhere else, and you'd be dead. The crowd murmured in disbelief. Carden, one of the top-ranked students, had been utterly defeated. Ronin's gaze swept over them. Who's next? His eyes landed on another student holding a towel. You! He called out. Shameless! Ronin's voice was laced with ice. If the towel stinks, wash it yourself. Why are you forcing her? He demanded. Do you think the assistant is your personal servant? Today, I'm going to break your nose. But Adishin suddenly cried out, Please, stop! She stood between them, shielding the bully. I don't know why you're doing this, but it's not necessary. It's all right. Ronin's voice softened slightly. Assistant, please step aside. He could tolerate many things, but not her being humiliated. He thought that not these idiots, not anyone in this empire, should ever treat another person this way. Move, he repeated, his resolve hardening. His intent was clear. He wouldn't stop until every one of them was taught a lesson. Just then, a powerful voice commanded. Ronin, that's enough. Instructor Nabaros approached. I will overlook the duel. Accidents happen in the heat of battle. However, she warned, if you continue this rampage, I will not be so lenient. Drop your weapon, now. A strange pressure descended on the field. As her aura flared, she looked behind her and saw the spectral form of a serpent. He thought she was unprecedented, even when compared to the Sword Saint. Instructor Nabaros's aura manifested as a giant, terrifying serpent. She told Ronin that what he was doing was no longer a duel. As the one in charge, she couldn't let her class descend into chaos. Ronin's eyes were defiant. Then you should also know what your assistant has been enduring. You've stood by and watched, doing absolutely nothing. This is your final warning. Stand down, the instructor ordered. But Ronin didn't flinch. I don't care if you're a sword saint or not. My answer is the same. He met her gaze without fear. I will crush every last one of them. In that case, she sighed, you leave me no choice. With that, she unleashed the Serpent of Torment. His world dissolved into a waking nightmare. A memory surfaced, and the great commander's voice echoed in his mind. Why did you volunteer when everyone else refused? Her voice was filled with a familiar sorrow. One day, you'll understand. Some burdens cannot be forced upon others. It was simply fate. That was the only explanation she could offer for her thoughts. Suddenly, the vision shifted. He was surrounded by mountains of the fallen, never realizing this was the weight she carried on her shoulders. Her voice reached out to him again. I'm sorry for placing this burden on you. Never forgive me. He jolted awake with a choked scream, realizing it was all just a horrifying nightmare. A gentle voice cut through the haze. What's wrong? Did you have a nightmare? Instinctively, he whispered. Great Commander. Blinking, his vision cleared. It wasn't the commander, but the assistant instructor standing before him. He quickly covered his mistake. Am I in the infirmary? She nodded. Yes, the instructor had me bring you here. She also left a message, Adishin added. She intends to correct your audacity. During supplementary lessons, starting today, a chill ran down Ronin's spine. He was in for a world of trouble. Adishin hesitated. Are you angry with me? He scoffed. I'm angry because I am sensitive to etiquette and a respectable gentleman. She bowed her head. Please, don't hate Carden and the others too much. It's not that I understand their feelings, she admitted. But please don't let this stress you again. She wondered if she even had the right to ask. After dedicating herself so completely as an assistant, he didn't ask why she chose this class. He knew she thought being lenient would make them understand her situation. But what about the instructor? The one who saw everything and chose to do nothing but watch.
Adishin revealed the truth, explaining that she herself had requested this ordeal.
He couldn't understand why she'd do something so reckless, especially with her special status. He thought she didn't deserve such treatment.
She confessed she was a year behind and had only just begun to control her mana. Ronin found that impossible to believe, given the great commander's overwhelming aura.
He realized she must be carrying a heavy burden of her own. The girl explained that she'd privately asked the instructor not to interfere after they accepted her as an assistant. She refused to be an extra burden, certain she could handle the pressure. She would bear it as many times as necessary. Even so, she genuinely thanked Ronin for stepping in. She thought she'd grown used to it. But Cardin's cruelty had truly hurt. He connected the dots and asked, "Is all this pain just to become a great commander?" She gasped, covering her mouth in surprise. "Is it that obvious?" she asked, admitting that was her goal. She was just too embarrassed to declare it with pride. But her deepest dream was to one day become a great commander of the Empire. She knew what people whispered about her, that she was just an inexperienced dreamer. She heard it all the time, but she would never give up. Showing him her calloused hands, she declared she was giving it her all, every single day. She then excused herself, saying it was time for her next class. She told him to get some rest before heading back. Ronin thanked his senior for her help. She simply smiled and said she would see him next time. He lingered for a moment, his mind racing, staring at her empty seat. His thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion. He remembered the commander's warning, ordering him not to let her do anything foolish. Now he was torn. The woman before him dreamed of becoming a commander, yet the girl from his past begged him to prevent it. A few days later, over the weekend, they arrived at the Grand Forge of Cappadocia. Ronin, Maria, and Aesel stood at the entrance, waiting to be seen. But the entire place was deserted. Why bother sending a message in the dead of night if no one was even going to be here? The note had been clear. "Your sword, my greatest work, is finished. Come claim it." This abysmal service was infuriating. His frustration boiled over, and he started kicking things aside. Maria asked Aesel why Ronin was on edge, but he could only guess something happened in class. Ronin declared he wasn't waiting any longer. They were going inside themselves. Maria wondered if that was allowed. He shot back. "They're the ones who summoned us. We have every right." Inside the elevator, he began searching for the activation panel, finding the controls. The three of them began their descent. He muttered that the old man didn't even grasp the basics of customer service. His anger turned to shock as the elevator doors opened, revealing an inferno of roaring flames. Many bodies were already consumed by the fire, with no chance of survival. Aesel pointed to a hulking figure in the chaos, a stone giant. It was hunting down the surviving blacksmiths. What was a golem doing here? Aesel yelled that the blacksmiths were about to be caught. Without a second thought, Ronin grabbed a cell and prepared to act. He ordered Maria to find instructors, or anyone who could help. Then, with his invisible hand, he used telekinesis to leap into the chaos below. The blacksmiths, exhausted from running, collapsed to the ground, believing their end had come. Just then, a brilliant flash of power erupted, shattering the stone giant into countless pieces before their very eyes. Ronin had been carrying a heavy weight on his mind lately. This was the perfect outlet. He sneered at the monsters. "Your little party is over." Ronin declared the party was over for these piles of rock. One of them lumbered forward, preparing to attack him. Even as the creature's massive fist closed in, Ronin didn't move an inch, patiently waiting for the perfect moment. When the time was right, he unleashed a single, devastating counterattack that obliterated the stone giant. Its head crashed to the ground, shaking the very earth. The blacksmith stared in shock, recognizing Darren's guest from the other day. Standing atop the rubble, he demanded, "Explain what happened, now." The two blacksmiths and Aesel came down from the wreckage to meet Ronin on the floor. After hearing their panicked story, he asked, "So these stone giants just appeared from nowhere?" They confirmed it, completely clueless as to the cause. They had burst from the ground without any warning and immediately began destroying everything. All the other blacksmiths, including Darren, were captured and dragged back underground. They said Dedicon had chased them, but he was no fighter. If this situation continued, Ronin realized, they would all end up as monster food. He confirmed there were no others left in this chamber. One of the blacksmiths stammered that he had just killed the last one. Ronin gave his orders. until Mario returned with reinforcements. He was to find and heal every last wounded person.
Seda would remain behind, ensuring first aid could be administered without a single delay. Aesol watched Ronin, his concern evident. Ronin vowed to rescue the captives and retrieve something vital from Dawn himself. Meanwhile, Dawn was praising Dakon's courage, insisting he never should have risked his life or even been there at all. Dakon urged him to flee, but the master blacksmith was fixated on one question: would his invisible armor hold? Furious, Dakon snapped that a battle was raging around them. This was no time for idle chatter. He roared, "If you have the energy for nonsense, then swing your sword." But Duran refused. That blade was his greatest masterpiece. He couldn't bear to damage it. With his clumsy swordsmanship, Dakon was certain the man was insane. A true weapon-obsessed lunatic. This was getting out of hand, and worse, the stone giant was charging straight for them. The creature raised its colossal fist high, a shadow of death falling over them, before bringing it down to crush Ditkin. Seeing the giant's strike land, Darren screamed, convinced his friend's life was over in that instant. But he was tougher than he looked. He withstood the crushing blow from the stone giant, avoiding any serious damage. However, his armor's defensive enchantment shattered, and the giant was already winding up for another attack. He thought, if this was his end, he should have lived without regret. As the giant's fist descended to deliver the final blow, a flash of steel tore through the air. Ronin's blade sliced the monster to pieces. "You did well," Ronin said calmly. "But you can leave the rest to me. Go and rest." Before him stood several more stone giants, but their numbers meant nothing to him. He positioned himself as their unshakable shield. Ditkin was in disbelief. How did he get there so fast? There were giants blocking the path. Ronin simply stated he dealt with them all and rescued the other blacksmiths. Ditkin could only stammer that it was impossible. "Enough useless talk," Ronin commanded, cutting them off. He turned to Duran. "Hand over the sword, the masterpiece you spoke of. Let me see it." Dunn, though obsessed with his creation, handed it over. He explained the hilt was still missing, making it incomplete, but it was still usable. Ronin was eager to test its true power, and right in front of him, he had the perfect targets. One of the stone giants reached out, its massive hand attempting to snatch him. He smirked, wondering if he should give it a little swing. In the end, he unleashed his power in one extraordinary strike. A single, sweeping blow obliterated the giants, leaving the two blacksmiths completely speechless. What in the world is that marvel?" one of them gasped. Darren beamed with pride. "What do you think of Lancia?" "That is its name, inspired by a favorite dreamer. He was overjoyed to have crafted such a masterpiece. The blade was so light, it felt as if he were holding nothing at all." Don explained he hadn't even enchanted it yet, as the sword possessed a trait that absorbed blood to restore any damage. He theorized it was due to the materials, forged from the shell of a ribbon egg. "Blacksmith," Ronin said, "you are far more amazing than I imagined." Don swelled with pride, thrilled that Ronin appreciated his work. Dakon, ever practical, urged them to leave. "We're the only ones left. There's no one else to save." But Ronin told him to take Don and go on ahead. There was something he had to check. "It's nothing major," he said calmly. "But I sense a rat hiding nearby. A very large one." Dedekon was confused. A rat. Ronin explained that something felt off. He knew the nature of stone giants. They weren't inherently hostile creatures. Ronin began analyzing the back of their heads, his strange behavior confusing Duran and Dakon. After a moment of intense scrutiny, he found it a suspicious mark, a magic circle. He asked Don if he had ever seen anything like it. The blacksmith admitted he was no specialist, but he could tell the mana reverberation was masterfully done. This was what had driven the stone giants mad. Who in the hell would do this? He wondered aloud. A question Ronin shared. And that, Ronin declared, was exactly what he intended to find out. Ronin dashed into a subterranean passage. He wasn't certain at first, but the deeper he went, the more sure he became. Mixed in with the giant's footprints were other tracks. Tracks that looked chillingly human. He then encountered a magical stone defense system. Whoever did this had planned it meticulously. He paused, catching the faint sound of voices he couldn't quite make out. Hiding in the shadows, he strained to listen, and then he saw it something that seized his full attention. It resembled a giant, but its scale was beyond anything he'd ever seen. The two figures standing before it confirmed his suspicions.
They were the masterminds.
But he still had no idea what that monstrous thing was.
The giants he fought before were mere children compared to this titan. It appeared to be sealed for now. But he knew it could awaken at any moment. Ronin's presence was finally detected. He overheard their conversation. The brainwashing bond on the stone giant had been severed. The woman's voice was sharp. Was it a third party? The man cursed. Those empire bastards were too fast without a stone giant sovereign. We can't even operate that thing. He growled, his mind made up. Since it has come to this, I will eliminate him myself. Edwin, she warned, you've already wrecked most of the facilities. This will cripple the Empire's weapon maintenance. But if our identities are revealed, that person will not stand still. She urged him. We should retreat now. You're too strict, Cyrilla. He scoffed. There's no other choice. It's time to dispose of our little pest. Do as you wish, she replied. Ronin listened as they sealed his fate, sensing the crackle of magic being forged in the air.
I'm getting sick of this, the man snarled, unleashing a torrent of fire in Ronin's direction.
The firebomb exploded, bathing the area in flames. They watched the inferno, convinced no one could survive. As expected, but from the smoke, a figure emerged. Who are you? The man demanded. To survive that attack, you must be quite skilled. Flames danced around his hands. Perhaps I should bind your feet first, he taunted. The speed at which they materialized such powerful magic was incredible. Realizing this was no ordinary trespasser, he questioned. How did you get in here? Our defensive barrier is not easily broken. Ronin's voice was cold. My turn. Who are you? This is a rather extreme place for a hideout. Edwan laughed. It would be a pleasure to kill a jokester like you. But the woman grew anxious. We're running out of time. Let me have a little fun. Cyrilla, he pleaded. It won't be long before the starlight buries this miserable empire anyway.
At those words, Ronin froze. A memory from his past life, spoken by a giant.
A cold fury washed over him. He confronted them, his voice dangerously low. Where did you hear those exact words? Do you even know what they mean? He roared. Edwin flinched at the sudden, overwhelming change in his aura. Ronin declared, You're coming with me. I have many questions for you. Edwin sneered, blind to the true danger. This kid must be insane if he thinks he can capture us. As a fireball ignited in his palm, he mocked. You really think that's possible, brat? In less than a heartbeat, Ronin closed the distance. Yes. A crimson arc flashed through the air as he severed the man's arm. It's possible, he whispered. So shut up. It happened in an instant. Edwan was on the floor, crawling desperately toward his own severed limb. Cyrilla was stunned into silence. Not even Edwan could react to that speed. She moved to cast a spell, but a cold hand was already clamped around her neck. Ronin's voice was like ice. It would be wise for you to answer my questions objectively.
Staring into her terrified eyes, he warned. Unless you want to end up like your friend? His grip tightened, and just as she was about to pass out, a brilliant mana shield erupted.
The force of the barrier pushed him back. So you refuse to cooperate, he stated. Tapping the shield, he added, quite sturdy, but not nearly enough. His blade sliced through the air, and cracks spiderwebbed across her ultimate defense. Her mind reeled. How could he cut through her mana shield? The barrier shattered. His sword pierced her side, deliberately missing her heart. He saw her pointed ears. A half-elf. How disappointing that she'd associate with such scum. Suddenly, a bizarre presence flared nearby, followed by a powerful explosion he hadn't seen coming. He turned, his foot still pinning the half-elf to the ground, and cleaved the approaching flames in two with a single swing. It was that strange flame creature from before. It continued its barrage, even though he'd already severed its limbs. He then noticed the impossible. Every time he cut a limb, a new one would regenerate instantly. This was no normal being. From across the room, Edwin screamed, Get away from her! Ronin glanced at the pathetic man, still holding the half-elf hostage. You truly don't understand the situation you're in. To prove his point, he drove his sword down into the girl's leg. Edwin's face twisted in helpless fury. Looking at him, Ronin declared, You are in very big trouble. So choose, either you listen to what I have to say, or I demonstrate amputation on this elf. Do her arms grow back like yours do? Defeated, Edwan surrendered. I'll go with you. Ronin pulled his sword from the girl's leg. Good. I'd rather not hurt anyone else. It would be troublesome if one of you were to die. He glanced down at his hostage, and she was smiling. A chill went down his spine. Why was she smiling? A colossal shadow rose behind him. The sealed stone giant was free and ready to attack. For the first time, he had been caught by surprise. Even so, his battle-honed instincts took over, allowing him to dodge the devastating first strike. The impact threw him far across the chamber, leaving nothing but dust and rubble. The power of that giant was absolutely immense. They were certain he was finished. Cyrilla admitted she owed Edwin for that one. If he hadn't created that opening, she'd never have had the time to activate her perception magic, let alone summon the golem during their standoff. She sat wounded amidst the rubble, while he stood tall. Their golem had left a trail of immense destruction. Cyrilla noted that even summoning it with a single arm had undoubtedly caused significant damage. Edwin declared, "I will kill him. You go to the church and report what's happened." "Be careful," she warned. "He's a monster trapped in a child's body." Edwin scoffed. "He's no child. If we don't end him now, he will become an unimaginable threat in the future." Ronin had no interest in their words. He simply began to carve the man up again, this time intent on dicing him into the smallest pieces imaginable. After finishing his grim work, he turned to her. "Where do you think you're going? I believe I already made myself clear." Staring her down, he said, "There is so much I need to ask you." She couldn't believe it. How could he still speak in such a mangled state? Even so, she conjured a protective barrier to keep him away. "I'm not in the mood for games," he growled. "I will never allow people like you to have the last word." But then, the effects of her curse began to take root in his body. He could no longer command his limbs as he wished. Cyrilla, seeing the tide turn, was annoyed. But since a decisive victory was impossible, reporting the situation became her top priority. As Ronin stood paralyzed by the mana-infused spell, she taunted him. "Get ready. I will uncover every secret of your life and take everything you have. Your family, your loves. Every life connected to you will become mine." He couldn't let her escape like this. If things unfolded as they did before, he would end up completely alone once more. The only thing he could do was wish for her to stop. With his last shred of strength, he roared for her to halt. Just then, a familiar aura descended. A powerful voice commanded the woman to stop, and she instantly froze. "I also have many questions to ask," the voice added. Ronin knew who it was. "First," she announced, "let me confirm something. Who are you? And how dare you touch my disciple?" Instructor Nabaros turned to Ronin. "I've heard the details. You've done a good job." He thought her timing was incredible. She looked at him and said, "It's nice to see you in a place like this. You seem to be fine, seeing as you're still flattering me. However," she said, her gaze turning to ice as she faced the other woman, "I'll handle this one first." Cyrilla finally understood. An aura shaped like a great serpent was coiled around her, paralyzing her entire body. She foolishly thought she didn't need to run. Right before Nabaros forcefully grabbed her face. "You have done things you never should have done. And what angers me most is that you hurt my disciple. Eagerly await your future, because you will see it with your own eyes." She slammed the woman's face into the mana serpent she had created. The woman offered a final prayer to the stars before fainting moments later. The instructor said, "After your wounds are treated, you can report the situation to the headmaster," Ronin asked. "The future you spoke of. Does it have something to do with Leland Prison?" "Yes," she replied. "How do you know so much about it? And why do you ask?" he said. "As I suspected, the Fortress of Screams. Lodlon. Leland was a notorious prison fortress in the middle of the ocean, known for interrogating criminals who dared to oppose the Empire. They used every method imaginable." Ronin asked his instructor if he could accompany them for the interrogation. She looked at him strangely. "What are you talking about? That is no place for you." But he grabbed her arm and insisted, "I only want to go this one time. This is a truly important matter for me," he pleaded. She looked at him, considering his desperate plea, but didn't answer right away. Meanwhile, the wounded from the incident were receiving first aid nearby. Several people were injured, including some elderly with minor wounds. It seemed that everyone was finally going to be all right. Maria and Aesel stayed behind, tending to as many people as they could. Aesel was worried about Ronin, hoping he would return soon, fearing something terrible had happened. And just as they spoke his name, he appeared. Maria and Aesel, along with little Sita, were talking about him. He said, "I heard a summary on the way. I know you all did a great job." He'd heard how Maria brought reinforcements, while Aesel and Sita saved more than half of the blacksmiths there. "Are you two hurt?" he asked. Maria retorted, "That's what we should be asking you." Aesel, along with Sita, urged him to get treated quickly, but he replied, "I've already received basic treatment." His mind was already on the crisis unfolding around them. He needed to extract information from the prisoners.
There was something he had to do. A few hours later, on a hidden path to Lodlon, they stood on a cliff in the Gregno forest.
With the prisoners secured, the instructor turned to Ronin. Their destination was at hand. The Lolon escort descended upon enormous, majestic birds. Upon landing, they immediately greeted Miss Neighboros. They announced they were summoned by the Empire to question the captured criminals. Their eyes fell on the two prisoners. Nabaros offered a crucial warning. The man possessed an incredible regeneration ability, a fact to remember during questioning. One of the escorts smirked. It had been a long time since such an amusing subject had crossed his path. With that, they declared their departure, promising to make contact once the interrogation bore fruit. He gave her a final look, urging her to continue her efforts for the Empire's peace. Then, with the prisoners in tow, they soared into the sky. Nibiru figured a week would be all they needed to break them. She assured Ronin she would notify him the moment she heard anything. He needed to be ready to move on a moment's notice. She asked if her arrangements were sufficient. He confirmed they were, offering his thanks. Time flowed quickly after that day. Carpadoki's restoration surged forward thanks to the Empire's full support, while Ronin spent his days in supplementary training. A few days later, a chilling scene unfolded. Within a corridor of the infamous Lolland Fortress of Screams, agonizing cries echoed from a heavily equipped room. An interrogation was underway. The interrogator chuckled to himself, admitting he'd been so entertained, he nearly forgot about their expected guests. Just then, deep within the Fortress of Screams, a figure emerged to greet the instructor and Ronin. He introduced himself as the interrogator assigned to the new criminals, and the one who would be their guide. With a disarming kindness, he asked if they wanted to see the criminals first. The instructor agreed, eager to hear the interrogation details immediately. But something about this old interrogator from Lolland felt off to Ronin. A strange presence lingered around him. Ronin voiced his distrust. The instructor simply noted that everyone felt that way when they first met the man. She hinted that he would soon understand why the interrogator was known as the worst nightmare. He explained the cell was close by, offering a quick summary. The first piece of information was vital. Nebula Clausier. That was the name of the organization they belonged to. Ronin wondered if it was another criminal syndicate like Caliboro. The man confirmed it was, but they were a complete unknown. Their identity and the true danger they posed were still a mystery. He connected them to a series of devastating fires in various locations, confirming the organization was behind the chaos. Ronin was baffled. He'd never heard of such a significant group in his past life. The man promised more details in the official reports. He then posed a question. Had they ever used terms like stellar light, or perhaps star's advent? The interrogator's face was blank. He'd never heard those words before. Both he and the instructor turned their gazes to Ronin. Ronin explained he overheard those phrases during their capture, suspecting they were tied to their ultimate goal. He then questioned why the prisoners hadn't mentioned it. As Ronin put on his mask, he saw it again. The man's aura grew hazy, indistinct. The interrogator was visibly displeased, his methods having shown flaws during their initial session. A flicker of embarrassment crossed his face. It seemed he hadn't been entirely forthcoming. Now, he had no choice but to try much, much harder. Looking at the state of the prisoners now, Ronin could hardly believe they were the same formidable people he'd fought before. The interrogator returned to the topic of Edwin. He claimed the method to break him was simpler than anyone could imagine. All they had to do was find a way to stop his regeneration completely, a task that would require their utmost effort. After that, the interrogator claimed they became the best of friends, though he suspected the prisoner was still hiding something deep inside. He turned to Edwin, reminding him of their promise to be completely honest with one another. The interrogator demanded to know why the first mention of Star's advent didn't come from his lips. The boy tried to speak, but some unseen force seemed to block his words. With a chilling tone, the interrogator warned that this conversation needed to end with him, reminding Edwin that Miss Cyrilla had no such regenerative powers. He leaned in close, his voice a venomous whisper. They had been together a long time. A little more pressure, and she might not survive it. Ronin was stunned. Even during his time as a soldier, he had never witnessed such a brutal method. Yet, he wondered if it was possible to hide things even in this hell, even with their identities exposed. Perhaps a deeper secret remained. Then, a thought struck him. What if it wasn't that they wouldn't say it, but that they simply couldn't? Ronin spoke up, recalling a method used on soldiers to seal away information, a powerful technique to prevent secrets from ever being leaked. He suggested that might be the case here. The interrogator froze, utterly mortified for not considering it himself. How could he have possibly overlooked something so fundamental? He asked them to wait right there. There was something he needed to get. With a new sense of purpose, he rushed off. Minutes later, he returned, carrying a collection of very strange items. These unsettling creatures were called cursed eyes. They were a unique type of monster that literally devoured curses. Their purpose to break criminals bound by magical silence during interrogations. The interrogator declared, "Edwan, you'll start with him." And with that, he pressed the creature to the man's forehead. He whispered to the cursed eye, "I'll release you soon, so begin when you are ready." Extracting the information was a fierce struggle. The prisoner's will resisted with all its might. But in the end, the little cursed eye was victorious. The moment the curse was devoured, Edwin's mind was an open book. The first question was fired. What is the advent of the star? He answered like a zealot, saying the star was an eternal entity, the only grace that could save the lower beings of the world. They were waiting for its magnificence. He confessed their sacred duty was to ensure nothing could interfere with this ancient mission, this long-held desire. That's too poetic, the interrogator cut in, simplifying it. Are you saying something is about to fall from the sky? What is it? With the curse gone, he had no power to hide the truth any longer. He was forced to reveal everything. "It is the child of the stars," he whispered. Ronin, who had been observing in silence, instantly understood. The pieces clicked into place. It was the Ayut. The interrogator motioned for Ronin to wait as he closed in on Edwin. But Ronin stepped forward, his eyes locked on the prisoner. "The child of the stars you speak of. Is it the Ayut?" Edwin's face twisted. What is an Ayut? How could you possibly know that name?" His entire appearance began to shift. Ronin stood his ground, watching as the man's form horrifically altered before his very eyes. "Ronin, get back!" the interrogator shouted, throwing up a protective shield. Edwin looked like he was about to detonate. And in the next instant, he did. The interrogator's barrier held strong, protecting them from the blast. Even after removing the silence curse, he never expected this outcome. Ronin asked if this was a common occurrence. The interrogator replied, "It's exceedingly rare." He theorized that the curse had been cast in 2 layers. The first layer was simple to prevent him from speaking of the star's advent to any outsiders. But the second was a failsafe. The moment a specific keyword was mentioned, the curse would trigger a self-destruct sequence. The interrogator placed a heavy hand on Ronin's shoulder. "What is an Ayut?" he demanded. "If I'm not mistaken, that's classified information. How did you learn of it?" His gaze intensified, boring into Ronin. "As the lead interrogator on this case, I require an answer." Ronin's expression remained neutral. "It was nothing special. I learned of it purely by coincidence. You know you were the first to find me," he explained calmly. "I simply overheard it while I was in hiding. At first, I dismissed it as unimportant," he continued. "But after arriving here, I thought it might be a significant clue. Then, in the heat of the moment, I got ahead of myself. My apologies for interfering." Ronin calmly removed the interrogator's hand from his shoulder. "Is that explanation sufficient for you?" The interrogator's mind raced. A coincidence possible. But he was certain Ronin was hiding something much deeper. He searched the young man's eyes for any flicker of deceit. And in them, he felt an incredibly powerful will. He analyzed that gaze until he found the source. It wasn't deception. It was a blazing hatred for those people. Just then, the instructor noticed the interrogator's intense focus on Ronin. A ripple of power served as a warning as she snapped. "That's enough. Karaka." Furious, she confronted him. "Are you daring to question my disciple right in front of me?" "Of course not," he said, feigning a casual tone. "Merely verifying, it's best to be thorough." He immediately offered a shallow apology to the Sword Saint's disciple. But another had noticed Karaka's dangerous interest. And now he wanted to interrogate Ronin as well. The interrogator, Karaka, was frustrated. He had just lost a valuable cursed eye, and they were incredibly difficult to acquire. She mused aloud. Are they really that powerful up close? They look rather cute. Karaka suddenly had an idea. Would you like to touch one? But as he glanced at the other cursed eye, he noticed a change. It had absorbed the curse, but it wouldn't even approach Miss Cyrilla. Then his gaze shifted to Ronin, remembering the mana shield. He recalled the moment he'd touched Ronin's shoulder. It was only for an instant. Picking up the remaining cursed eye, he called out to him. He placed the creature on Ronin's arm, saying, "My apologies for my earlier rudeness." Before Ronin could even question this sudden gesture, the cursed eye began to violently consume a curse from his body. And then, it immediately self-destructed. Ronin was stunned. What is this? Why did it just explode on its own? Karaka grabbed Ronin's arm, his eyes wide with discovery. It seems the creature couldn't withstand the sheer amount of curse it found. He looked directly at Ronin, his voice low and serious. It appears, Mr. Ronin, that you yourself are cursed. The interrogator's questions turned sharp. Had he ever felt restrained in his daily life, unable to run freely, or even grasp steel objects, peculiar weaknesses that plagued only him? The instructor's gaze was like ice. She knew exactly what this line of questioning was leading to. The man sighed. If he wished to hide the truth, he wouldn't press further. But this was not a problem he could solve on his own. However, one thing was certain. The sheer power radiating from this curse was immense. He couldn't fathom who cast it, but their malicious intent was terrifyingly clear. Shortly after, the questioning came to an end. They offered their thanks for his cooperation. The interrogator promised to share any new information that came from Cyrilla's interrogation. He warned them, however, that a curse this powerful would not be unraveled quickly. The instructor understood perfectly. She urged him to contact them the moment he discovered anything. She turned to Ronin, her voice softening slightly. His mind must be a whirlwind of chaos right now. Ronin could only agree. His very body had been branded by a curse. Then, the interrogator revealed he was a student of Fion. The instructor's eyes narrowed. What exactly was he implying? He explained his connection, a lead from a long time ago. There was only one mage on the entire continent who specialized in curses, the renowned Professor Maya Secret. As they flew back to the academy, the instructor noticed Ronin's unease. His heart was still pounding, wasn't it? He clutched the strange eye in his hand. This unsettling feeling had been with him for some time now. He traced the feeling back to a single moment, when he first touched that grotesque, eye-shaped monster. He asked her if something was seriously wrong with him, but she offered a glimmer of hope. This was a sign that the curse's grip was finally weakening. She then asked if he could think of anyone who would harbor such a deep grudge against him. Ronin's mind came up empty. He couldn't imagine who would hate him so fiercely. As far as he knew, he had lived an honorable life. Changing the subject, he thanked her for her help back in Lolan. Ronin confessed that the old man's piercing gaze was terrifying. If she hadn't been there, he might have confessed to crimes he never even committed. She simply stated it was her duty as his instructor. No thanks were necessary. But Ronin saw her true character. She wasn't just skilled, she was a truly good person. And that was the most bizarre part, because in his past life, he had never even heard her name. He wondered if Nebula Clazier had somehow altered history. If that wasn't the case, then this woman's existence was a complete mystery. The next day, at the Academy's magic training grounds, Sherry Forest, was a place known as the Park of the Pillars. He ran into a familiar face for the first time since the incident. She admitted that without the instructor's intervention, she would have lost her position. She asked him how he'd been doing. He could only stare back at her with a blank expression. Then it hit him. The unresolved issue with the Grand Commander. He still had no idea what in the world he was supposed to do about that. So, he just put on a smile and played along, asking how she was. She replied that since Cardin was dealt with, everyone had become much friendlier. Although, she added, every time she got close to him, he still seemed terrified of her. It's not a bad feeling, she mused. Then Addison's tone grew serious. She heard from the instructor that he'd been cursed. She knew he needed to find Professor Secret. That was precisely why she had come. Now, they just had to wait for the professor to arrive. As she was speaking, another figure appeared nearby. Her face lit up with pure joy as she leaped forward.
pulling Adishin into a tight embrace.
Adishin, she exclaimed. I've missed you so much. It's been way too long.
Seeing the girl's unrestrained energy, Ronin realized this must be the person they were talking about, the one connected to wolves and ears. He watched them catch up for a moment. Adishin apologized for the sudden summons, explaining that it was an important matter. Why would you need Professor's secret? The girl asked. Only then did her gaze fall upon Ronin.
A nervous sweat beaded on his forehead as her eyes widened in pure shock. Timidly, he explained that he was the one who needed help. He offered a hesitant greeting. Her reaction was nothing short of explosive. What are you doing here? She shrieked. She was clearly unhappy about guiding him, constantly questioning if this was even the right place. Her annoyance was palpable. The strange key in their possession unlocked the professor's office, a place hidden deep in the heart of the forest. Looking at the odd structure, a bad feeling crept over him. Are you trying to burn me alive or something? Eli? He joked. Her temper flared like a wildfire. Don't call me that. And who said I burn people fuming? She snapped at him to just follow her lead. Ronin wasn't surprised in the least. How could a hothead like her possibly be friends with the Grand Commander? He guessed she must be the original Akalusha, wondering how they ever met. At last, they reached their destination. She opened the door, inviting him to meet the professor.
Ronin scanned the chaotic room and had to ask, "This is really the professor's office?"
But Elizabeth stopped him, saying there was more to it. They then approached a gentle-looking lady sitting peacefully in a rocking chair. Elizabeth gave Ronin one final, stern warning. From this moment on, no matter what happens, he was to stay perfectly still and do absolutely nothing. She then began to chant, weaving words of power before casting the spell toward the old woman. He watched with bated breath, but saw no change whatsoever. The old lady was completely unaffected. Suddenly, her mouth began to unhinge, stretching wider and wider until it became a terrifying, gaping void that dwarfed them both. Ronin could only ask what was happening. Elizabeth calmly told him not to be afraid. This, she explained, was the real office. The world twisted as if they were being teleported, and with another word from her, the true office materialized. He couldn't help but think the entrance was a bit over the top. As he walked down the long corridor, he felt the unmistakable sensation of being watched. He was being observed by a student sent by Miss Nabarros. In a flash, she lunged at him, prying his eyes wide open with her own hands. She sensed a powerful, unyielding will burning inside him. This was the continent's most legendary curse artist, Maya Secret. Despite her youthful appearance, she was 83 years old. Ronin stared in disbelief. Could this child really be the professor? She simply told him not to be so surprised. She claimed it was due to personal circumstances. But regardless, her body was still that of an 80-year-old. There was a limit to how young one could appear, she said. But there were far more important matters to discuss. With a sharp snap of her fingers, the curse clinging to his body became visible to the naked eye. She declared her mission was to free him from it. Now that it was visible, he could see the horrifying truth of it all. The professor herself was shocked, never imagining so many curses could be woven into a single soul. She murmured that even a master of the highest skill would never be able to touch something so complex. He grew anxious and asked if this meant she couldn't remove it. She just smiled, telling him not to worry. She had come prepared, and he needed to listen carefully. Her plan was to materialize the curse from his physical body and manifest it within the mental realm. His only task was to find the origin of the curse that bound him, and sever it. The plan seemed simple, just cut the curse. But then he asked how he would know what to cut. The magic instructor simply told him that when he saw it, he would know instinctively. She placed a hand on his forehead, pulling his consciousness into the mental realm. And just like that, his world changed. The origin of the curse was somewhere in this mindscape. He saw a child run past him and realized with a start that he was standing in front of his childhood home. He was certain that whatever the origin was, the answer lay inside that house. He watched as the little girl ran past him, calling for her mother. He recognized that voice instantly. It was his sister. She ran straight to a cradle to look at her little brother. She asked her mother why Ronin was always sleeping, worried that he might be sick. His mother gently explained that babies grow strong in their sleep, just as she had once done. His sister proudly declared that if her brother ever got sick, she would take care of him. because she was the big sister. Every detail was just as it was when he was born. He came to a startling conclusion: the baby in that cradle was him. He found it hard to believe there was a time he was ever like that. He was sure he'd been grumpy his entire life. This meant he was witnessing his own past, a past he had absolutely no memory of. Suddenly, the front door opened. An oppressive presence flooded the room, so powerful that his eyes widened in terror. He began to tremble, realizing his body was completely paralyzed. He had no idea who this person was. His sister ran towards the figure, calling out a name, but the sound was muffled and unclear. His mother greeted the man, saying she had expected him sooner. The visitor walked toward the cradle, curious to see the newborn Ronin. Then, the man reached out, touched his mother's forehead, and made her collapse into a deep sleep. Seeing her mother on the ground, his sister, Uriel, cried out in fear. Ronin was still frozen, unable to move to protect her. As the girl asked why he'd hurt her mom, he simply cursed. Blazing fury surged through Ronin as he watched that man's hand touch his sister.
With his family taken care of, the man continued his slow walk toward the cradle.
Only then did Ronin notice the dark, sinister energy coiling around the man's hands. It looked exactly like the curse that had been pulled from his own body. As the man's hand touched the baby, an unbearably bright light consumed everything. Ronin was blinded, but now he knew for certain. This was the origin he needed to eliminate. Outside the mental realm, the professor was speaking with Elizabeth. She spoke with an impressed tone about the incredible curse. Elizabeth asked the professor if there were many of them. She replied that if you were to count them, there were 10. Elizabeth was stunned. 10 curses was an impossible number. Elizabeth felt a wave of despair, believing that even the legendary professor wouldn't be able to free him from so many. But the professor said it wasn't that difficult, which was what surprised her the most. The curse actually causing all the trouble was only one. Back in the memory, the mysterious man, having put his mother and sister into a cursed sleep, approached the cradle where baby Ronin slept. After inflicting the curse upon him, the man turned and walked right past the adult Ronin who was watching. As the man vanished, the paralyzing pressure was released, and Ronin could finally move. He scrambled to his mother and sister's side, desperately checking if they were okay. To his immense relief, they were merely trapped in a deep, unnatural sleep. Kneeling beside them, a wave of helplessness washed over him as he tried to calm his racing heart. He had only one mission in this mental realm. He had to kill him. With a vicious slash, his sword tore through the door as he burst out in pursuit. But to his shock, the man was already outside, waiting. He demanded to know what he wanted, why he was just standing there. The figure said nothing, an emotionless statue of a man. Rage flared in Ronin's eyes as he roared. "How dare you touch my family! I will never forgive you for this," he bellowed, charging forward to strike the man down. That man drew a sword of his own, and steel met steel in a deafening clash. The duel was ferocious, pushing even a master swordsman like Ronin to his absolute limit. How could a mere curse wield a blade with such terrifying skill? He wasn't just fighting, he was being completely overwhelmed. Throughout the battle, the Phantom's blade found its mark again and again, leaving deep cuts across Ronin's body. Then, in a blur, the man swept past him, carving a brutal gash across. The blow was devastating. Agony sent Ronin crashing to his knees, his breath stolen from his lungs. The man looked as if he was about to leave, but Ronin refused to let it end this way. He couldn't understand why his sword couldn't even reach him. He couldn't let him go without answers. He couldn't let it all end like this. He told himself to stop being a crybaby and get up, because there was still something he had to ask. Staggering to his feet, he declared, "This isn't over yet." He demanded to know why the man was doing this. He explained that from their expressions, their tone, their actions. His family wouldn't act that way with just anyone. He recognized the same affection in their eyes that Arrow had when she looked at him. That could only mean one thing. That phantom was that person. "Why did you do it?" he screamed. But it was like shouting into a void. He would receive no answer. He seethed, saying that man had brought sorrow to his mother and sister, and had even cursed him. And even after all that, he wouldn't apologize or explain himself. Leaping forward for the final attack, he roared, "How dare you call yourself a father?" And then, he decapitated him with a single, clean blow. As the head rolled to a stop at his feet, he drove his sword straight through it. He spat that if the man didn't want to say anything, that was fine. he would discover the truth himself. At that very moment, a voice echoed through his mind, commanding him to get out of his body. The images shattered, and he suddenly woke up in a completely different place. He had no idea where he was, but he could hear the faint sound of a magical chant. Then a voice spoke, saying he had finally woken up, and asked how he was feeling. He was startled and demanded to know who was there. Ronin was on the ground, confused and disoriented, unable to see who was nearby. Then he wondered, could it be Professor Secret? She sounded pleased that he had recognized her. He grew worried, thinking she had appeared because of something he'd done. She told him not to worry, as this had nothing to do with him. Cutting the conversation short, she asked him if he felt anything different. He admitted that he always thought she wasn't normal when they first met. But now he could say his initial suspicions were 100% confirmed. He stared at her, and she stared back, smiling happily. She said that meant everything went exactly according to plan. As they sat for tea, he confessed that this entire situation was almost impossible to believe. She explained that the curse inside him had used memories he didn't even know he had to construct that entire false world. She told him she believed the person who cast the curse might have been his own father. Ronin grimly replied that it was likely. She asked why he thought so, since he claimed he couldn't recognize the person. Ronin's anger flared again as he explained that when the man messed with his family, he knew something was terribly wrong. He realized that the entire memory, the entire feeling, felt too distant to truly belong to him. He described it as a deep, profound sadness that felt like it belonged to someone else. He said maybe that was why he felt even more furious. Thinking about it now, that raw anger might have been his own true feeling piercing through the illusion. The instructor then asked about his parents, and he confirmed he had no memories of them at all. He said he and his sister never even doubted it, as if those memories had been surgically cut from their minds. So, the magic instructor concluded that it wasn't just his human senses that were severed, but a piece of his entire existence. She said it seemed his father, through that very curse, had also altered and sealed his memories. During that twisted process, a fragment of his father's own memories might have been transferred into Ronin. Memory magic, she explained, almost always has side effects, and the mental realm likely used those fractured memories to build its trap. She continued, saying that the reason he could suddenly use mana before the curse was broken was likely because he had temporarily regained his lost senses. For a short time, he was whole again. She then asked if that energy leaking from those glowing threads he saw was, in fact, mana. She told him that for now, he would only be able to see it, but one day, he would be able to wield it. But only if he managed to remove 2 of the 9 remaining curses on his body. She also warned him that it might take a very long time. The curse placed on Ronin was incredibly powerful and of an unknown origin. She would contact him again when the preparations were ready, and told him he could leave for today. But just as the sun began to rise, he was startled as she suddenly transformed, becoming young again right before his eyes. He asked in shock if she changed her form according to the time of day. She explained that her body was complex. She warned him of a harsh reality ahead, urging him to stay strong. He promised to count on her support. Meanwhile, deep within the Carpadoki basement, the hand of that colossal giant remained. Researchers were stunned by their findings. The scale of the threat was far greater than imagined, yet a single student had handled it all. The very idea was hard to believe. Just then, a figure arrived to speak with a man observing the giant's remains. The man turned as a young man named Dolan approached, asking for a report on the reconstruction efforts. Dolan confirmed everything was proceeding smoothly. Within a week, things would be back to normal. He added that he'd followed orders and investigated, but couldn't find any new information on site. However, thanks to Fayan, he had confirmed the identity of the student behind the heroic act. Dolan then asked the Grand Duke if he wished to meet him personally. This was no ordinary duke. He was Joseph Sivan Grantia, the formidable head of the Grandia ducal family. The Duke agreed. It was best to meet this remarkable boy face to face. But as he stood with his back turned, a terrifying presence stirred. The giant's eyes began to glow with life. Dolan apologized, urging the Duke to retreat immediately. He could see the giant was reanimating, preparing to attack. Dolan declared that he and the knights would handle this threat. "There's no need," the Duke stated calmly. As the giant's fist descended, the Duke and his servant were still mid-conversation. With his hand on his hilt, he spoke without a hint of urgency. In a single, fluid motion, He drew his sword, and a flash of light bisected the colossal foe. The force of the blow sent up a cloud of dust and light, forcing Dolan to shield his eyes. After dismantling the giant, Joseph calmly sheathed his blade. As if nothing had happened, he beckoned his subordinate to leave. Behind them, the giant's massive form crashed to the ground. The Duke was now truly eager to meet the young hero of Fion Academy. The next morning at the Nardozer dormitory, a loud knocking echoed. Ronin, annoyed, wondered which lunatic was banging on his door. He opened it, still half asleep, to find Dolan. "Who are you?" Ronin grumbled. "Beggars aren't allowed here." Dolan was taken aback by the boy's sheer audacity. He coldly asked Ronin if he had any idea who he was speaking to. Ronin sized him up. Noting the look of a noble, he sensed a dark, strange mana, but there was something else mixed within it. It didn't feel like pure mana at all. In fact, it felt disturbingly familiar. Suddenly, another hand rested on Dolan's shoulder. A calm voice advised him to wait, saying they were not in a position to act so rashly. A girl's voice chimed in with a sharp retort. That's when it hit Ronin. He was in the presence of the Empire's Grand Duke. The Duke walked toward him, offering an apology for his knight's behavior. He then politely requested a moment of Ronin's time. Soon, the two were seated, with Dolan standing guard nearby. The Duke presented him with the blade's sheath, which had been completed just the day before. Ronin didn't have to ask why his grace had brought it. The Duke explained that the master blacksmiths of Carpadoki had insisted. He noted that Master Don was particularly adamant. Furthermore, the Duke wanted to express his own personal gratitude. The Grantia family and the Great Carpadoki, he explained, shared a powerful and long-standing bond. He revealed that his own famous sword, the Pale Path, was also forged by Master Don. As thanks, he offered something more than just the sheath. The Duke presented Ronin with the Grantia medallion, an item bearing the patriarchal seal itself. Ronin was stunned. A treasure so precious it could buy 3 entire villages was being given to him. The Duke explained that the other 2 students who assisted had also received gifts and medallions from the blacksmiths. "I hope you like it," the Duke said, unaware that they would treat this gift like a sacred family heirloom. Feeling relieved, he decided to move on to the main topic, the true mastermind behind the incident. As the Duke voiced his interest in these sinners, Ronin felt a strange vibration in the air. The sensation was unsettling, but he was also awed. This was the true power of the leader of the Grantia family. Ronin warned that the rats they were dealing with were more dangerous than anyone could imagine. At these words, the bodyguard visibly tensed. Ronin immediately noticed Dolan's mana begin to shift and fluctuate. He wasn't sure what it was, but it was a clear reaction to his words. And it was the exact same feeling he got when he fought those 2 assailants. In that instant, he came to a chilling conclusion. The Duke's own bodyguard was one of the rats. He looked at Duke Joseph, asking what was wrong. He saw Ronin had suddenly gone silent, completely unaware of the dark aura now radiating from his own subordinate. The Duke even asked if Ronin was feeling unwell. Ronin couldn't believe it. How could the most powerful man on the continent not sense this sinister energy? For some reason, he was the only one who could perceive it. He then asked His Grace if he had ever heard of the advent of the stars. At those words, the Duke's bodyguard could barely contain his killing intent. As the provocations mounted, Ronin finally dropped a name, the Nebula Chassier organization. The Duke was utterly stunned. He never imagined an organization of that magnitude could operate on the continent. He demanded to know if Ronin uncovered this alone. Ronin replied it was long before the structure ever appeared. Ronin kept taunting them with tales of their weakness, of how they begged for mercy. The Duke asked if he needed to hear the grim details, and Ronin offered to tell him everything. But the Duke refused, claiming the truth was so vile he wouldn't be able to stomach his next meal. So Ronin held his tongue. He knew he didn't need to say another word. A dangerous aura began to leak from the bodyguard. His control was slipping. The Duke rose to his feet, his mind racing. They had infiltrated Grantia. Urgent measures were needed immediately, but Ronin stopped him, saying there was one more crucial piece of information. The Duke demanded to know what he meant. Ronin explained that the matter was too complex for a short discussion, so he would write a full report that night and send it by courier. He promised it would be a very interesting read, especially since it involved a Hudi. And just like that, Ronin knew he had snared the full, undivided attention of the Duke's bodyguard. Later that night, Ronin feigned a deep sleep. He felt a hostile presence seeping into the air, but he was already expecting a visitor. fully prepared for what was to come. Dolan was shocked. The moment he moved to strike, Ronin had vanished into thin air. A voice echoed from the shadows. "I knew you would come." Ronin appeared, a smirk on his face. "It's a pleasure, little rat number 3. When Dolan demanded to know how, Ronin just told him to relax. He then gestured into the darkness, saying, "Perhaps you should greet our special guest first." Dolan's eyes widened in horror. It was the Duke's own son, the young Master Schlieffen, his face a mask of fury, demanding an immediate explanation. "How am I to interpret this, Sir Dolan?" Just a few hours earlier, Ronin had paid a visit to Schlieffen's room in Nabdozer Hall. The young master had been puzzled by Ronin's sudden appearance, but Ronin's words had been chilling. "Sir Dolan plans to silence you tonight."
Schlieffen was skeptical and demanded proof. In his mind, Dolan was one of the Grancia family's most skilled and loyal knights.
Ronin's reply was blunt. 4 years ago, Grancia was full of fools.
"But don't take my word for it," he continued. "See for yourself. You have nothing to lose."
"If I'm right, you'll expose a rat in your own house." Back in the present, Schlieffen's rage boiled over. "Are you deaf? Dolan, explain yourself." But Dolan remained silent, his cold gaze fixed on the young master.
Ronin scoffed. "What kind of traitor confesses just because he's asked, 'How do you plan on surviving this?'"
In response, Dolan simply stomped his foot. Ronin felt a massive vibration surge through the ground. His body grew heavy under an immense pressure. He was being flooded by Dolan's mana. The attack had already begun. Schlieffen cried out, questioning his actions, only to become the next target of the assault. "It's fortunate the young master hasn't perfected his mana domain," Dolan mused aloud. "Such a pity. I never wanted it to end this way. But that brat ruined everything." Schlieffen's eyes narrowed. "Your skills, they're different from what I remember." Dolan had been hiding his true power all along. "It's not betrayal," the knight sneered. "If I was never on your side to begin with."
With those words, he lunged at Schlieffen, who remained perfectly still, waiting for the blow.
He seemed to be in shock, muttering that he understood everything now, telling Dolan to do as he pleased. But Ronin moved like lightning. He stepped in to block the fatal blow, protecting the young sword saint from harm. He shot Dolan a look of contempt. "You're really enjoying this, aren't you? Feeling better now that your secret is out?" Dolan simply replied that he needed to be certain, hoping Ronin would understand. Placing a hand on Ronin's shoulder, his voice was low and menacing. "For a time, Grancia will become a river of blood." Then he moved to end the situation himself. As they clashed, Dolan had a chilling thought Ronin, too, was hiding his true abilities. But Schlieffen was done playing games. He unleashed an attack that sent Dolan flying. This wasn't hidden power. He had grown exponentially stronger in a short time. Dolan couldn't believe his eyes. This was impossible. He knew Schlieffen was a genius, but his focus wavered, his mind reeling. This momentary lapse gave his opponents the perfect opening to launch a counterassault. Dolan's arrogance was absolute. He believed he could handle the two of them alone. With a roar, he charged forward, striking with his full might. But even as his blow landed, Schlieffen moved like a phantom. Ronin was shocked he had dodged in the nick of time. He didn't just evade, he countered a brutal strike sent Ronin flying, crashing with a sound that shattered the silence. That noise would surely draw the instructors. He knew he had to retreat, and began desperately searching for an escape. He never imagined things would spiral so far out of control, all from trying to eliminate a single child. He had gravely miscalculated, thinking he could defeat them both at once. He needed an opening. But as Schlieffen leaped to strike, he told Dolan he was right. Unlike his legendary father, Schlieffen's skills were still unrefined. He couldn't properly wield the Tempest Sword. However, he chose this battlefield knowing no one else would be harmed by the technique, except for Dolan, the traitor who had to die.
Schlieffen unleashed the Grandia family's secret art, the Tempest Sword.
The moment Dolan saw it, he knew his life was over. As the devastating attack closed in, he shut his eyes and whispered a final prayer. "Dear star." As the storm subsided, Schlieffen sheathed his sword, declaring that from this day forward, the family would erase his very existence. It didn't matter, for he was never a true Grancia. Ronin remarked that Schlieffen certainly handled things in a flashy way. He could also see that the young master was deeply angered. Ronin admitted he wasn't sure he could even get the bodyguard back to Loilon.
Schlieffen brushed it off, saying theoretically, the man wouldn't die. And with Ronin there, everything would be under control.
He had to report this to his family. The Grantia clan needed to hunt down every last traitor. He left the rest in Ronin's hands and departed. Ronin yelled after him, "Hey, you're the one who destroyed everything. Why are you leaving the mess to me?" A voice cut through the air, asking what had happened. Ronin turned and saw them the Academy's headmaster and instructor Nabaros. Ronin's attention was immediately drawn to Nabaros's unusual attire. He smirked and commented that he liked her pajamas. She demanded he answer the question. The director intervened, stating that the instructor's taste in sleepwear was not important. He was relieved that Ronin was safe, but he demanded an explanation for the chaos. Ronin was about to explain, but first needed the director to hear him out. He stated loudly, "Damn a Hayut!" The words seemed to make no sense to them. The director even repeated the bizarre phrase, completely failing to understand it. Inside the office, the director was briefed on the espionage crisis within the Grania family. He said that thanks to Ronin, they had prevented a far worse catastrophe. Ronin asked for one thing in return: to keep his ability to see that special mana an absolute secret. He feared that the people close to him would become targets. The director agreed. Vowing the incident would be investigated immediately, he declared that the Empire was once again in Ronin's debt. He would be rewarded and was asked if there was anything he desired. Ronin said there was something he wanted, and he needed official approval for it. The next day, in Filian's Great Hall, Ronin was the center of attention. A massive crowd had gathered to hear him speak about something new he had created. He called it the Special Adventures Club. He laid out his vision, a club dedicated to external activities and focused on real-world battle. With the director's personal approval, it was the only club permitted to operate outside the Academy's walls. To join, one only had to show up at the first Galilean arena during the scheduled time. The commotion caught the eye of a mysterious woman, who seemed very interested in Ronin. A few days later, he found himself regretting that grand spectacle.
Only his friends had appeared. Maria asked if he really didn't understand why. It was all because of the interviews.
Under the pretense of a skills assessment, Ronin had utterly crushed every single applicant. He had also said ominous things, as if ready to sacrifice himself for the club. A rumor was spreading that you'd need at least 10 lives to join. Ronin defended himself, saying that's what real fights were like. For him, this was perfect. He only needed promising individuals. Ronin asked a battered Braun if he felt better after their spar. Braun was completely exhausted from the fight. Ronin declared that he had passed, and Braun's face lit up with joy. He warned that the club could be grueling and asked if he was truly ready. Braun said he had been waiting for this chance, as long as it made him stronger. Ronin told them to rest before the real training began. He said he would stay a while longer, hoping a truly talented individual might still appear. A long time passed, but no one else came. He turned to Adishin and admitted that it seemed no one else had the guts.
They were preparing to leave when Ronin noted that as the instructor's assistant, she was always very busy.
Adishin replied that if it weren't for her duties as an assistant, she would have tried to join herself. Ronin thought to himself that even if she had tried, he wouldn't have accepted her. He needed to be selective as he pursued his dream of becoming the Grand Commander. He was pondering this critical issue when a voice cut through the silence, relieved to have found them. His eyes followed her words, a smile forming on his face. He was certain she was another hopeful applicant for his club.
She paused, asking if he had cut her off because her voice was too faint to hear.
"If I join this club, I can touch it, right?" Her gaze locked onto Ronin as she lowered her hood, asking for his touch. Ronin was completely taken aback by her strange demand. What kind of person boldly asks for something like that? She clarified it wasn't him she wanted to touch, but the creature perched on his shoulder. "You mean Sita?" he asked. "You should have led with that." He explained that the little creature was his constant companion, so if she joined the club, touching Sita would be guaranteed. Ronin studied her, thinking she was an incredibly odd girl. But what truly baffled him was how he hadn't sensed her presence, despite her being so close. He knew instantly. This was no ordinary student. He could feel an immense hidden power radiating from her. Her interest was piqued. She asked what she needed to do to pass the interview. "My name is Oelia Denite, a high beginner mage." And with that, she began to gather her power, unleashing a blinding torrent of mana. Both Ronin and Adon watched, mesmerized by her display. She was channeling the forbidden art of dark attribute magic. Adishin was in disbelief. Her control over such volatile magic was flawless. But Ronin's sharp eyes detected something far more astonishing. It was faint, yet unmistakable. A crimson energy was bleeding into her aura. He recognized that sinister mana. He was absolutely certain of it. She unleashed her technique, a devastating attack called the Shadow Claw. The attack didn't just strike the training dummy. It cleaved it in two. Her explosive power stunned Ronin and moved so fast Adishin could barely even track it. Ronin stopped the test right there. "There's no need for a duel," he declared. "You've passed." He was about to question her, but was suddenly silenced by an unseen mental force. Her voice echoed directly inside his mind, a product of telepathy magic. She asked him to keep her secret for now.
She requested a private conversation, needing to ask him something important, alone. The two of them watched as she analyzed Sita with a look of dawning realization.
"Is this a dream bird?" Oilia asked. "How fascinating. A creature born from the mana woven into the very land itself." Ronin found her equally fascinating. After all, the history books claimed that every last vampire had vanished from the Empire years ago. "Not all of us," she corrected. "A few bloodlines still endure, living quietly within the Empire's borders." She explained that her kind despises trouble, preferring to live deep within the shadows.
He put the pieces together. "Is Sita's mana the reason you approached our high-profile club?"
"I sensed it the moment I first saw you in the hall," she confirmed. "Blood magic is the innate power of my kind." Ronin nodded, finally understanding. So it was true. Sita was wielding the abilities of a vampire. Oilia was shocked to learn that Sita had absorbed blood the very moment she was born. Noticing her surprise, Ronin pressed her. "What is it? What's wrong?" She asked him exactly when Sita had been born.
"About 2 months ago," Ronin answered. "For one so young to possess such potent blood mana, it was unheard of."
Oilia gazed at Sita, a new theory forming in her mind. "If that's true," she murmured, "then it might just be possible." She had a request for them, but she hesitated, knowing it was far too soon to ask for such a significant favor.
"Could I observe her for a while?" Oilia asked. "If you grant me this, I promise I will make it worth your while."
She admitted that she first needed to conduct some research of her own. It would be difficult for now, but she swore to uphold her promise later. Ronin was confused, demanding she explain what this research entailed. The next day, the members gathered at the Nest, the official headquarters of the Special Adventures Club. Ronin looked around the impressive building. For them to dedicate an entire building to a single club shows just how much they value us. He then shifted the topic, announcing that a few things had changed. He gestured to a rack of legendary weapons from Carpadoki, a gift from the Grania family. He noted Maria now wielded a magnificent greatsword, forged by the Grand Commander himself to perfectly enhance her unique abilities. Aesel showed off a new magical bracelet, crafted near the magical city of Delpium. He marveled that his control over magic had improved dramatically, his power and speed feeling like they had doubled. Mario wanted to know why they'd been summoned fully armed. Ronin's expression turned serious. "Because we need to have a very important conversation. I know you're all curious why I created this club," he began. "We have one goal: to evolve our latent skills as fast as possible through real-world combat." He knew in his gut that he had to prepare them for a day that was fast approaching. A map materialized before them. He pointed to their first destination, an uncharted mountain range known as the Vadian Mountains.
While Braun practically buzzed with excitement, Aesel and Maria, who knew Ronin's true nature all too well, were filled with absolute terror.
He warned them the place was deeply unusual, making it an experience they'd never forget. He mentioned having his own business to settle there, but that was a story for another time. First, an issue between them needed to be settled. When Maria questioned him, he simply brushed it aside. They were leaving now. He declared it was time for them to fight. In the hall, Aesel demanded to know what problem Ronin was talking about. Ronin revealed he wanted them to finish their models ahead of schedule. He pointed out that their trip would take at least a week, and their classes were still in session. Juggling club activities and coursework would be impossible, and the headmaster would never approve it. But Ronin already had a solution. They simply had to finish their classes early, just like he did, and they would be completely free. Before their individual training, he announced they would test their current abilities. Ronin challenged them both to attack him, promising to only use his scabbard so they had nothing to fear. He added that it would be no fun if they held back. They were to come at him with everything they had. Maria's eyes lit up. If that was the case, they would use that. She turned to Cell, declaring it was time to show him their true growth. Cell agreed, promising his absolute best. Maria gripped her sword, a familiar weight in her hand, and announced she was ready. Ronin acknowledged her incredible strength. But her first move was baffling. Why did she strike the ground? The moment her blade hit the earth, it was Acel's turn. He commanded the countless stones that erupted from Maria's powerful impact. Acel, levitating amidst the debris, gave Maria the signal to begin. He channeled his power, connecting with every single floating stone particle. A thrill shot through Ronin as he dodged the barrage of attacks. He had to admit, Acel's control was truly impressive. Then Maria appeared from nowhere, catching him by surprise. She warned him not to block, but to only dodge. She unleashed her full power, a devastating strike he evaded at the very last second. He knew with chilling certainty that if he hadn't moved, that blow would have been his end. She was starting to enjoy the thrill of battle, just like him. She pressed her assault relentlessly, but he danced between each and every one of her attacks. To turn up the heat, he began his own counter-assault, putting her on the defensive. They had shattered Ronin's expectations in so many ways. He stared at them in awe, marveling at how far they had come. Acel roared for Ronin to get away from her, unleashing a massive torrent of power directly at him. Sensing the immense energy, Ronin drew his blade and charged forward. His heart pounded with excitement as he prepared to meet Acel's attack head-on. He sent his own attack roaring forward to intercept it. He then looked on, measuring the reach of his own power. A satisfied smile spread across his face. The two had improved tremendously. It was clear they hadn't been slacking off in his absence. Both of them, especially Acel, seemed like entirely different people. The transformation was astounding. Acel asked if the test was over. Ronin confirmed it was more than enough. Their progress meant it wouldn't take long now. Maybe a month, or perhaps even just 2 weeks. With that, their special training could begin this very moment. Maria protested that they had just finished their duel. Ronin waved it off. That didn't matter. They were starting immediately, and he was already chasing them with his sword drawn. He pursued them relentlessly, hungry for another duel. 2 weeks later, he was handing out something truly shocking: certificates. The director was stunned. Was he truly saying these were early completion certificates for every single member of the club? Ronin confirmed it. He clarified it wasn't for every subject, but asked if it was enough to grant them permission to leave. The director agreed. A promise was a promise. He would allow them to leave the grounds. The very next day, they stood in the Vidian Mountains. Maria could feel it instantly. The mana in the air was incredibly pure. Brune asked what the plan was now. Ronin told them to wait, as they were still far from their true destination. As for their mission, he revealed they were there to find something. But the wind carried his words to the ears of another, who now knew guests had arrived in this mysterious figure mused that it had been a long time. It was finally time to greet the visitors. High in the mountains, the 4 members of the adventure club stood ready. Ronin's voice cut through the air with excitement. He'd found it. It was just as he suspected. A massive swarm of orcs. Brun stared in awe at the fortified village they had constructed. Ronin explained that in borderlands like these, maintaining order was nearly impossible. With their rapid breeding, the orcs would soon swarm the entire mountain range, bringing disaster to everyone living nearby. So before that could happen, they would wipe them out. This would be their first real battle. He challenged them, asking if they thought it would be easy. Acel admitted that when he heard orcs, he had imagined something just like this. He was worried, seeing their overwhelming numbers, and wanted to be sure they would all make it through. But Ronin declared them the perfect opponents. Still, he knew that even if a variable appeared, the true dominant species of this mountain range were the ogres. These creatures were so formidable that even Ronin nearly fell in his past attempt to subdue them. A mysterious figure approached, acknowledging their noble cause but advising against it. He spoke of an ill omen in the weather, a warning to the young adventurers. Ronin was stunned. He hadn't sensed the man's approach at all. Ronin demanded to know who he was. The man simply told him to lower his guard, introducing himself as a humble priest from the mountains. A priest Ronin questioned. The elf affirmed it, stating he served an ancient spirit. With his hand gripping his sword, Ronin listened as the priest invited them to a more suitable place to talk. The moment he called their current location unsafe, Ronin's blade was at his throat in a flash, shocking the entire party. Ronin demanded an explanation, claiming crazed individuals had been rampant lately. He ordered the elf to repeat his next words exactly. "Damn, Oat!" Ronin commanded, even with cold steel on his neck. The priest hesitated to utter the phrase. A moment later, a deep blush of shame spread across the priest's face for speaking such words. He muttered it was his most embarrassing moment in the last 200 years. Ronin's eyes widened. 200 years? Was he truly that old? The elf casually mentioned his true age was in the thousands, leaving everyone speechless. He had been here since before the Empire was even born. Ronin refocused, asking about the warning the elf had given them earlier. The priest explained that the monster's behavior had recently become dangerously erratic.
Orcs, creatures of the day, were now prowling the mountains at night. Ogres, who never left their territory, were spotted at the mountain's edge. The cause of this shift was still a mystery, making caution their greatest weapon. He then told them to relax. With a simple touch on what looked like thin air, the barrier shattered, revealing a hidden temple. Braun gasped. For a temple to materialize from nothing, it had to be a high-level magic barrier. Cell asked Ronin if he knew about the temple. He shot back, asking if she didn't see the shock written all over his face. As the elf welcomed them inside, Ronin knew this was no ordinary priest. Ronin gestured to a strange stone, asking if that was the Lord Sen he served. The priest called it a stone of significance, but a story too dull for them. He urged them to settle in for the night, pointing out the temple's many empty rooms. Maria whispered that this was the perfect chance for Ronin to ask about the very thing he was searching for. The elf's eyes found Ronin, sensing the curse plaguing him. He could feel a chaotic and dangerous energy swirling within Ronin's soul. The priest then asked for a moment more of Ronin's time. He wished to speak with him privately, over tea. The elf revealed he had a premonition the instant he saw him. He questioned if Ronin was merely a student. He admitted he'd been swept up in Ronin's pace, only realizing the oddity of it now. Clutching his sword, Ronin's mind raced. Was he being paranoid? Did this man truly have no connection to his enemies? But he couldn't sense any of that foul mana from him. And when he'd tested him with the word Ayut, Ronin showed absolutely no reaction. A cup of tea was placed before him. The elf noted that Ronin seemed lost in thought. His eyes narrowed at the tea, suspecting a trick, but a captivating aroma began to pull him in. He had never experienced a scent so pure, so potent. Suddenly, his vision erupted in a kaleidoscope of colors. He was seeing the pure, untainted flow of mana. The elf asked him about the tea's fragrance. Ronin could only state that it felt as if his eyes had been completely replaced. He demanded to know how this was possible. The elf explained it was a tea brewed from a mythical herb that rarely blooms on the mountain. Its effects were potent, but because Ronin's energy was suppressed by the curse, the results were far more dramatic. The priest offered him some of the herbs, but gave a stern warning. He had to stop using his cursed eyes to fight the curse. He explained that while those eyes could devour curses, they also devoured the user's strength and life force. Using it once may not be fatal, but repeated use would undoubtedly put his life in grave danger. He asked if Ronin knew the risks. Ronin admitted he had no idea. His only goal was to break the curse as fast as possible. The elf warned him that the greater the haste, the more one must be willing to retreat when things go wrong. He cautioned Ronin that a single misstep could lead to an irreversible fate. His words echoed Professor Secret's warning, that the curse was treacherous and removing it would require immense preparation. He knew people were willing to help him, but ever since that monstrous entity appeared, a desperate urgency had taken root in his heart. But he had to be careful. If he died, his quest to capture that titan would end before it had even begun. He stared at the elven priest, a question echoing in his mind. He couldn't recall meeting him in his past life, yet a sense of unsettling familiarity lingered. A pressing urgency gripped Ronin, an instinct fueled by the presence of those religious fanatics lurking nearby. The elf probed for more information about these zealots. Ronin revealed their dark purpose. They were awaiting the advent of the stars. They were a grim and eccentric cult. The elf realized with a chill that the star-worshipping fanatics had begun to make their move once more. As darkness fell, he stood before his sacred stone, his fears confirmed. The zealots Ronin mentioned were exactly who he thought they were. They were weaving a catastrophic plot, one that would soon drown countless innocent lives in blood. A terrible calamity was approaching, and he would be forced to watch it unfold again. Unless unless that boy was the answer he had been waiting for.
He was speaking to the stone when Ronin's presence cut through the silence. Ronin simply asked if he was still awake. Sarant turned, asking why Ronin was up so late, wondering if his accommodations weren't to his liking. Ronin's gaze returned to the stone, remarking on how fascinating it was that such an object could represent a god. Sarant explained that every 1,000 years, their order moves 1,000 stones from the Kanja sanctuary to the empire's most remote regions. In a land where the rain never ceases, most stones erode within 100 years, washed away by the relentless water. But despite this, the soul that endures within becomes a true representation of their god. Senin. He vividly recalled the day he died alongside his brothers. An entire lifetime he had dedicated to a god who never once offered a reply.
Countless times his faith had wavered, tempted to cast aside his beliefs and chase a life of freedom.
But a powerful premonition always held him back. A whisper of Sen's will. It promised that one day, this path would be the first step to saving the world. It was an intuition he couldn't explain. To him, that feeling was faith itself, something that words could never truly convey.
Placing a hand on Ronin's shoulder, he declared with conviction that he believed that destined moment was drawing near.
The next day, the party was revitalized, basking in the incredible effects of the tea. The Monave's energy had sharpened their senses to a razor's edge. Later, Ronin found himself helping Sarante gather roots as they traveled through the mountains. He marveled at the elf's kindness. For a first meeting, the sincerity in Sarante's heart felt profoundly genuine. The more Ronin observed him, the more enigmatic the elf became. 2 days of deceptive peace drifted by without incident. But tragedy often lurks in the shadows of celebration, waiting to inflict a pain that can never be forgotten. Ronin stood leaning on his sword, while Sarante rested against a stone. The path ahead was set, and there was no turning back now. On the day of the planned orc village invasion, as they said their farewells, a worried Sarante asked if they were truly prepared. He pointed out they still hadn't found the cause of the monster's abnormal behavior and urged them to prepare further. Ronin reassured him, their actions were strange. Yes, but they hadn't grown any stronger. The team he'd assembled was more than enough to handle them. Besides, he added, their field trip was nearing its end. They had to return to the academy soon. Sarante offered them a gift, a magic spell that would allow them to return instantly to the barrier, granting them free passage to the temple. He warned them that if they sensed even a hint of overwhelming danger, they should not hesitate to retreat. He gave one final warning, never let your guard down, even for the strong. This forest was a deep and treacherous place. On a dark path littered with the remains of monsters, a lone figure walked, leaving only destruction in their wake. This person smirked, vowing to make things far more dramatic. It was an elf, who had thought finding her target would be a simple task. She mused that extracting him from this place surrounded by beasts wouldn't be easy. From now on, she would hunt him herself. That same elf, now hunting for Sarante, tore through hordes of monsters, carving a bloody path straight toward him. From a high vantage point, the team watched the orc village. They saw the creatures wearing human clothes and jewelry that clearly wasn't theirs. The conclusion was grim. They had plundered a nearby village. Ronin turned to his comrades, asking if they were ready. The order was given they would attack and exterminate every last one of them. Down below, an orc complimented another's necklace. The other bragged it belonged to a child from the village. He laughed, recalling how the little brat cried until the very end, his loud voice making the kill quite difficult. But before he could finish recounting the horrific atrocities they committed, Aesel descended upon them like a shadow of vengeance. The time for talk was over. The entire team was poised to annihilate the whole monstrous village. Maria and Brune moved like a blur, perfectly synchronized. They unleashed a storm of precise cuts, felling several of the creatures in an instant. The orcs, seething with violence, fought back with brutal force. But Ronin's training had forged this team into a flawless weapon. They would not let such evil go unpunished. Aesel especially was a whirlwind of destruction, unleashing the full might of his newly acquired powers and techniques. His precision sharpened with each passing day, striking targets with flawless accuracy. Ronin couldn't help but be satisfied with his training's progress. He reported to a cell, confirming he'd finally mastered the technique. Now, they could make Ronin float alongside them, attacking foes with enchanted stones. Ronin was always there, pushing Aesel to stretch the limits of his telekinesis. Fueled by this encouragement, Aesel unleashed a storm upon the village, nearly wiping them out all by himself. But after the dust settled, a chilling fear gripped Assel, the fear of divine punishment for his actions. Ronin told him to calm down, assuring him that if judgment came for one, it would come for them all. Braun chimed in, grimly stating the punishment he'd receive would be the greatest of all. Those words didn't exactly help, earning him a sharp frown from Mario. Just as Ronin was lost in thought, Sita broke his concentration. She gently tapped his face with her paw, then pointed urgently, sensing something in the distance. Following her lead, Ronin and Aesel discovered a person, bound and helpless. Even from afar, they could tell it was an elf, likely left behind as some sort of emergency food supply. They raced to her side, calling for Sita to use her healing magic. As she stirred, Ronin leaned in, asking if she could speak. Her eyes were wide with terror, and Ronin detected a volatile surge of mana within her. He found it strange. Sita's healing should have stabilized her, but for some reason, the magic wasn't taking hold. She looked at him, her voice trembling. "The mana around you, it's different. Are you one of them?" Suddenly, panic seized her. "You have to take me there," she begged, tears streaming down her face. "They're on their way if we stay here. Sarante's life is in danger." In the next moment, she collapsed. Without hesitation, Ronin swept her up and rushed inside the barrier to find Sarante. Sarante looked up, surprised. "You're back already? Did something happen?" Ronin quickly explained. "We found her, a prisoner from the village. She was desperate to see you." The moment Sarante saw the elf's face, his own turned pale. "Brigida, what have they done to you?" Elsewhere, the other three searched the area as Ronin had instructed, but found no trace of anyone. Maria was about to call Braun back to the temple when she noticed Aesel had frozen, staring at something on the ground. She walked over. "Did you find something?" she asked. Aesel's reply was grim. "There's something wrong with these orcs." He pointed out that their appearance was unnatural. Maria confessed she didn't recognize it either. "I've never seen anything like this," Aesel admitted. It seemed their true nature had been concealed by complex, double-layered magic until now. "What do those magic circles do?" Braun wondered aloud. Meanwhile, the elf was finally receiving proper treatment from a worried Sarante and Ronin. "I've finished the first aid," Sarante announced. "She needs to rest for now." Ronin was troubled. Why didn't healing magic work on her? Was she afflicted with some kind of curse or poison? Sarante looked at Ronin with immense gratitude. "I am forever in your debt. If not for you, I would have lost my precious sister. She is one of the last followers of Senil," and his gaze softened as he looked at her. "Her faith has always been so deep. She is my strong, dependable sister." Sarante's voice grew serious. "You have saved someone irreplaceable to me. Tell me, how can I possibly repay this debt?" Ronin was still thinking about her frantic words, trembling as she warned them, warning that someone's life was in grave danger. Sarante stood before the stone once more, speaking with Ronin. "To be honest," he confessed, "even I am not certain of everything. They are a religious order," he explained. "Worshipping an unknown being they simply call God. They have hidden their identities for so long. Their true faces are a mystery. All I know is the trail of evil they leave behind. A religious order." As Ronin processed this, Sarante delivered the name. "They are called Nebula Chasseur." "Are those the people chasing after you?" Ronin asked. Sarante's eyes widened in shock, realizing Ronin knew of them. "I thought they had given up. They've been quiet for so long," he muttered. "It seems they have returned." "Then you must flee to the archipelago, just like we did," Ronin urged. But Sarante refused to abandon his post. "If I leave, the innocent people here will be caught in the crossfire," he said firmly. "That is a price I will not pay." He turned to Ronin. "I must ask you and your companions to leave this place, as soon as you can. I don't want you getting hurt for a fight that is not yours." But Ronin had a different plan. "I will bring back the strongest woman I know. Just hide until then, and do nothing reckless." Sarante pressed something into Ronin's hand. "This is payment for saving Brigitta's life." Ronin opened his palm to reveal a simple, elegant ring. "That ring," Sarante explained, "was once a pass to the Magic Tower. If you ever find yourself at the Dawn Magic Tower, show this to the librarian. I am certain they can help you with your curse," Sarante said, offering a final, solemn request. "Be careful on your journey, now. I will spend what time I have left with my sister." It was a parting gift. Ronin insisted this wasn't goodbye forever. Why the grim expression? He swore he'd be back soon, telling him to hold down the fort. The moment he was gone, Sarante leaned against the wall, as if bidding farewell to the entire world. Glancing to the side, he spoke with cold sarcasm. Well, well, if it isn't my dear sister, has it really been so long? He scoffed, retracting the statement. No, not my sister, just an assassin from the Brigia Order. She replied softly. Must you speak like that? Considering she asked how he'd been. He shot back. Of all the dogs they could send, they sent you. When she accused him of trying to poison her, he didn't deny it. Of course, I am dealing with the shadow of Romaheim. After all, she explained her elaborate ruse, pretending to be captured by orcs. Finding him had proven to be a true challenge. Even using monsters as bait to draw his attention had been completely ineffective. But eventually, she saw them. His funny little toys, brimming with time energy. For a moment, she considered tearing him apart. It would have been the perfect way to draw him out, but an old bond held her back. Weren't you moved in the slightest? She asked. His reply was chilling. In that case, I can't let you walk away. A shiver ran down her spine. The time for jokes was over. Enough talk, she declared, her voice turning cold. My orders are to obtain your surrender, or kill you where you stand. With that declaration, she unleashed an attack so powerful its energy rippled for miles. Far away, Ronin felt the immense surge. He stopped dead in his tracks, a dreadful feeling washing over him. It was in that exact moment that his team, who had been searching for him, finally caught up. You've arrived just in time, he said urgently. Report. Maria stepped forward, explaining that one unit had found something strange. Right after Ronin had departed, Aesel had discovered an odd marking on the corpses. A magic circle none of them recognized. The mention of a magic circle sent alarm bells ringing in Ronin's head. Suddenly, a massive explosion erupted from the direction of the temple. Ronin's heart sank. Sarante, the blast had stirred something terrible, awakening the nearby ogres. He watched in disbelief as a horde of them charged in their direction, a stampede of pure destruction. There was no time to investigate the temple explosion. They had a more immediate problem, a two-headed ogre. Inside the temple, the battle between siblings raged on. A powerful mage, Sarante fought his sister to a perfect stalemate. She never stopped trying to persuade him, even as she coated her blade with her own crimson blood. It was blood magic. She lunged with a terrifying attack, only to be blocked by her brother's defenses. Sarant held his ground against the powerful strike. Brigia was strong and fiercely determined. They both braced for the next clash. Brigia attacked again, each strike more unpredictable than the last. But Sarante, despite his strength, fought with a divided mind. Worrying about Ronin, the very temple was crumbling around them from the force of their power. Yet the two remained locked in an even struggle. You're still strong for an old man, Brigia taunted. It's a shame I have to kill you. Why can't we go together? She tempted him with an offer. If you come with me, you could easily secure an executive position, just like mine. Sarante sneered back. You've grown rusty, little sister. I thought the shadow of Romaheim was faster than this. You're just stalling, she retorted, seeing through his facade. You're so busy buying time for those kids to escape. You aren't even paying attention to me. His eyes flashed with anger. She had seen through his plan from the very beginning. You did all this just so that boy wouldn't be dragged into this battle, she continued. So you could leave with a clear conscience. It made her curious. He, who had protected the world for so long, suddenly seemed to have lost all interest in it. They are merely guests we met by chance, Sarante warned. Don't even think of laying a finger on them. If you cross that line, I won't let you go in peace. She just smiled. What a shame. It's already been done. As she spoke, he sensed an overwhelming energy surge from the direction his friends had fled. In that single moment of distraction, he let his guard down. It was the only opening she needed to sever his arm. Outside, the two-headed ogre was a torrent of destruction. Seeing the giant creature, all three of Ronin's companions froze in terror. Snap out of it, Ronin roared. Get behind me! You can't handle this thing! The ogre's gaze fell on Braun, who was paralyzed with fear. With a single, brutal slap, it sent him flying. He crashed against a rock with a sickening thud, gravely injured. Now, the beast's eyes fell on the other two. Their minds screamed, run, but their bodies were frozen.
As the ogre attacked again, Ronin moved like a blur, intercepting the devastating blow. Maria and Azel could only watch in awe as Ronin stood as their sole protector. They were stunned. Ronin showed no fear, not even before that towering beast. He tossed them a bandage, his command sharp. "Take this and go treat Braun." His voice was laced with cold fury and absolute resolve. "That one is mine." "Go, now!" Ronin roared, throwing the first aid supplies. As his comrades rushed to save Braun, something in the two-headed ogre's gaze caught his eye. It was a magical sigil, glowing within its pupils. He recognized it instantly. It was the same one he'd seen in the giant, the symbol of the Nebula Chaser organization. A burning rage consumed him as he charged the beast. He became a whirlwind of destruction, his strikes growing ever more ferocious. But the monster's hide was like solid rock. The ogre fought back, its crushing blows sometimes finding their mark. Ronin blocked the relentless assault, then answered with overwhelming force. That familiar, brutal strength. He remembered it well. The ogre began ripping trees from the ground, even hurling orcs like projectiles. In another life, Ronin would have relished this unfinished battle, but this monster had made a fatal mistake. It had dared to harm one of his own. At that moment, Sita was desperately trying to save Braun. Ronin locked eyes with the ogre, his voice dripping with ice. "You're already dead." He gathered his power, then shot into the air with a flurry of strikes, climbing higher and higher to position himself for the finishing blow. The ogre, however, would not make it easy. In his past life, this was where he had failed. He had lacked the power to pierce its impenetrable skin and deliver a fatal wound. He was about to change that fate, but this time was different. Now, he wielded a true sword, and the deadly techniques of his master. He took his stance, unleashing the fourth form of the Nabarro style, the spinning sword. With a devastating whirl, his blade finally tore through its flesh. As his feet touched the ground, he spoke to the doomed beast. "Give up. You just don't know you're dead yet." Hearing the colossal thud of the ogre's body, a single thought crossed his mind. He still had a long way to go. It had taken him far too long to defeat a single ogre. He immediately sprinted towards Azel, Maria, and the wounded Braun. His heart pounded with worry, but they assured him Sita's emergency treatment was complete. Braun would need a doctor, but for now, he would live. "You all go on ahead," Ronin commanded. "I'm going to Sarante." But when he arrived at the temple, a horrifying sight greeted him. The entire place was in ruins. He couldn't understand what had happened. He hadn't been gone for long. He saw a figure stumbling through the rubble and called out Sarante's name. Relief washed over the man's face when he saw Ronin was safe. Sarante struggled to stand, apologizing for not coming sooner. Ronin rushed to support him. "What happened here? Who did this to you?" "I'm all right," Sarante insisted. "But we have to end this. Today. They could return at any moment." But before he could finish his warning, a shadowy attack struck him with lethal force. Ronin watched, frozen in horror, as his friend was struck down before his very eyes. He desperately cried out Sarante's name. The man was down, but somehow still breathing. Ronin frantically tried to help, but the wound was critical. Just then, a new presence appeared. A woman, seething at the man beside her. "You almost killed me. How could you use such a dangerous skill on a former comrade?" she snarled, filled with rage. "The moment I broke free from your grasp, you launched that attack. You really tried to kill me," she scoffed. "If not for the blessing of the stars, I would have died." "I have no desire to fight you again," she said, turning her attention to Ronin. "But it's interesting that you defeated the two-headed ogre." He demanded. "Ah, you don't recognize me in this form," she purred. "Allow me to remind you." She mimicked a soft, pleading voice. "Thank you for saving me, adventurer." His blood ran cold. It was the elf he had freed from the forest prison. "I must admit, I'm grateful," she said with a chilling smile. "Thanks to you, I finally escaped that barrier. As a reward, I shall grant you a death that is quick and painless." With that, she unleashed a devastating attack, aiming to finish him and her brother in one blow. She was shocked to see him dodge flawlessly, grabbing Sarante on the way. She had thought he was just some naive boy. Ronin knew he was outmatched. This woman's power was immense. He got Sarante to safety. "Sita, take care of him." Sita immediately began emergency treatment. Ronin's patience was gone.
You rats destroyed the forge. You spied on the Duke's family, and now you've crawled all the way here. He stared her down. You're with them. Aren't you Nebula Chaser? Her smile widened. This gets more interesting by the second. Tell me, she asked playfully. Have you happened to meet any of my little babies? I heard some brute was killing them after their jobs were done. In a flash, she was right beside him, her voice a deadly whisper. And I have a feeling. That brute was you. He was stunned. Her speed was on an entirely different... Even so, she was impressed. For someone so young, she mused, your reflexes are quite good. No wonder all my babies are dead. Her attacks became a vicious storm. Yet he continued to evade each one, sparking her curiosity more and more. His evasions only fueled her curiosity. What secret was he so desperate to protect? Parrying her strike, he felt her immense power. It was as if she could read his every move. He had to end this now, while he still had the advantage. He lunged forward, blade aimed for the kill, only to find her waiting, a knowing smile on her face. She deflected his blade with ease. I've taken a liking to you, she purred. It would be a waste to kill such talent. Why not join our order? She promised him power and respect, things he could only dream of. In the end, she told him, he had no real choice. Suddenly, her attacks shifted, targeting his wounded brother. Refuse my offer, she threatened, and I'll butcher him first. Slowly and painfully, as she unleashed a barrage on Sarante, Ronin was forced to move, interrupting the vital healing process. Don't worry about me, Sarante cried out. Just run! But her cold eyes were locked on Ronin. His fate, she hissed, is now in your hands. Ronin's eyes blazed with uncontrollable fury. The only choice I'm making is to tear you limb from limb. He charged, screaming. You damn traitor! She just laughed, parrying his strike. Keep acting like that. It only makes me desire you more. The true battle ignited between them. For a moment, he could actually match her, blow for devastating blow. From the sidelines, Sarante could only watch as the ferocious clash unfolded. Wincing in agony, he tried to call out to Ronin, but his brother was trapped in a vortex of combat, focused only on the traitor before him. Brygia, however, was in a state of pure bliss. It had been an eternity since she'd found such a worthy opponent. With a final surge of resolve, he lunged, but she caught his sword arm with effortless grace, halting his attack completely. A cruel smile spread across her lips. Such a terrible waste, killing someone with your potential. Be a good boy now, she whispered. Don't even twitch, or I'll end you right here. A single, powerful blow sent him crashing to the earth. The impact rattled his entire body, but through the haze of pain, he saw her blade descending for the final strike. A twisted, joyful look crossed her face. The next time you awaken, she promised, you'll be welcomed by the sight of your allies, bleeding out on this very ground. This was it. He was finished. But a single thought burned through the agony. He had to move, now. In that instant, a shield of pure mana erupted into existence. Her blade stopped just inches from his throat, and her face contorted with rage. You again, she spat. Her own brother had dared to interfere. Sarante stood firm. I warned you, Brygia. Stay away from him. If you so much as touch him again, he warned, his voice like ice. There will be no forgiveness. Turning to Ronin, he said, You're in no state to fight. You've done more than enough. You bought me the time I needed. And that's when Ronin saw it. The immense well of mana Sarante had been gathering. Fully prepared, he pushed Ronin to safety with a wave of magic. Brygia's eyes narrowed. Did you really think I would just stand by and watch? She prepared to strike again, but as she scanned her surroundings, her smug expression vanished. She had walked directly into a trap. Magical seals blazed to life all around her. How? She shrieked. You're on the verge of death. How could you prepare this? Sarante met her gaze with calm, unwavering resolve. Because this is where your rampage ends. Summoning a tidal wave of mana, he prepared his ultimate technique, a final, heartbreaking farewell to the sister he once knew. Brygia was engulfed by the full force of his power. Ronin watched, awestruck by the legendary power on display. But a knot of dread began to form in his stomach. If Sarante kept burning his life force like this, he wouldn't survive. With a tired but determined smile, Sarante declared, I will give everything, my mana, my very life, to finish this. Enraged, Brygia screamed at him, demanding how he could possibly
Cast such a spell while clinging to that pathetic ghost. Her fury exploded, her aura surging to terrifying new heights.
We are the chosen of the star, she roared. As long as its blessing shines upon us, we are invincible. In her mind, he was a lost cause. Then I will simply kill you, she declared, her voice devoid of all emotion. At that moment, Ronin threw himself in front of Sarante. For Sarante, this was the end. He reached out to Ronin one last time with his mind. Listen quickly, his voice echoed in Ronin's head. There's no time Brygia can alter attacks using a skill called the Star's Blessing. But Brygia's movements were now sluggish, hampered by the grievous wound she had sustained. She pleaded with Sarante, her voice cracking. Run, please, run, so I can find you again someday. This wasn't how it was supposed to be.
Why are you talking like this is goodbye? Ronin demanded, as Brygia, despite her wounds, lunged for Sarante once more. When the dust settled, she stood again, a grim look on her face. I may have considered retreating, she admitted, but this is far from over. There's something you never understood about me, she told him. I have never once run from a fight, her eyes pleaded. Just this once. Believe me.
But then, her gaze fell upon the pillar of magic, and her fury was instantly reignited. You should have known your place, she spat with venom. And with a final roar, she unleashed a devastating storm of lightning. Ronin masterfully evaded the onslaught, waiting for the perfect opening as Sarante pressed his attack. But Bria merely scoffed. Do you really think that will stop me? Raising her sword high, she called upon the sacred blessing of the stars, moving in for the final blow. But this was the exact moment Ronin had been waiting for. He exploded forward in a flash. Her guard was fatally exposed. You'll never even touch me, she sneered. And in that instant, she knew something was terribly wrong. Her sword was gone. Then, her arm vanished. A devastating flurry of perfectly placed strikes followed. I made you believe you had the upper hand, Ronin stated, his voice devoid of emotion. She stared, her mind reeling in shock. How did you get past the star's divine protection? A chilling smirk played on his lips. Who knows, he answered dismissively. Bria shook her head, her world crumbling. It was an absolute impossibility. Before she could even process the unbelievable, Ronin unleashed his final assault. As she collapsed to the ground, he leaned in and whispered coldly, If you truly desire to know, then go ask your precious stars yourself, because I just severed your fate.